Hello to all my dear followers and be welcome to the second and final season of this great fanfic that we started a few days ago. First of all, thanks for all the support in the first season, the video has so many views. So, today we have the second season of What if Naruto mastered the wine element and fell in love with Shikamaru? I know there's no more seasons after that, but if you want to support the channel, don't forget to give your comment, like, and subscribe for more. So, we're gonna start.
Chapter 11. A Shocking Discovery. Leaf Village Shinobi Academy, April 2nd, 990 AS. The first day in a new class was always nerve-wracking, or at least, that was what Naruto's experience in his 8 years had shown him. He'd been especially nervous to merge into Class 3A. He was one of only 5 members of Class 2C that were left after the winter break. Thankfully, so far, his first day had been all right. Though curious, nobody was mean or anything. Their new teacher, Irika-sensei, also seemed pretty nice. A man with deeply tanned skin and a kind face, the fairly young Chunin had made everyone introduce themselves, so the new students didn't feel singled out. Naruto had listened attentively as the kids in his new class introduced themselves. They seemed pleasant enough with their own quirks. There was a surprising amount of clan children in the class, he noted. The Inuzuka was a bit loud and brash, and the Nara girl was admittedly lazy, looking as if she couldn't care less and would rather be anywhere else. Of all of them, the Uchiha stood out the most, though not for good reasons. When called upon by Irika, the Uchiha boy stood up. The boy's skin was pale and unhealthy, like he hadn't seen the sun in weeks. That made the dark circles under his eyes stand out all the more. He stared ahead with a blank expression and a 1,000-yard stare. "I'm Sasuke Uchiha." While the rest of his classmates had at least included more, Sasuke simply sat back down. He seemed oblivious to the mutterings of some of the new students. Namely, Naruto heard Miko and Nami whispering, "So that's the mysterious Uchiha that's supposed to be as strong as Naruto. He seems interesting." "Yeah. But did you hear what happened to his clan last year?" Naruto frowned. While whispered, the conversation between the girls wasn't nearly quiet enough to be unheard. Like everyone their age, he'd been shocked when the news of the tragic massacre of the Uchiha clan had trickled in last summer. At the time, Gramps had been especially busy and rarely attended family dinners. I wonder if the rumors about his brother torturing him were true. Judging by Sasuke's appearance, Naruto would be willing to bet the answer was yes. "Alright, next is Naruto Senju. Please introduce yourself." The second his name left Irika's lips, the eyes of the class snapped to him. His name being called triggered a lot of quiet conversation among the class. He didn't mind. Naruto had gotten used to this since he'd first joined the academy and people made a big deal about who his father and grandfather were. He stood tall and resolute as he introduced himself. "My name's Naruto Senju. My goal is to be Hokage. I hope we all get along, you know?" After his introduction, Naruto sat down promptly. He didn't want to have some long and drawling speech. Though short as they were, his words had left an impression on his new class. A couple of the girls in the back talked in between giggles. Meanwhile, Kiba, the Inuzuka boy, gave him a challenging smirk. As the introductions passed and Irika began their first lesson of the year, Naruto did his absolute best to pay attention. He was the best in his class. It was up to him to make sure to do them proud and try to be the best here as well. It was mostly a review for the first half of the day. Naruto was thankful the curriculum was mostly the same. Sure, instructors were allowed some leeway, but there was a lesson plan they had to stick to. So, through questions on geography, history, and basic tactics, Naruto did his absolute best. And aside from a somewhat quiet girl with short pink hair, he was definitely getting the most answers correct. All the hours Grandpa Hiru had forced him to study were paying off. The second half of the day was where he really began to have fun. That's when they began to get baselines on the practical side of things. When it came to target practice, he got second. It was a close loss to Sasuke. They were made to stand at the target range behind the school and throw kunai and shuriken at wooden slabs cut into the rough shape of a man, with circles painted on the vital areas. With a practiced hand, he'd placed nearly all his weapons exactly where he wanted them, except for a single kunai that barely made it into the bullseye over the heart. Sasuke, meanwhile, had created a tight cluster dead center. In trapping, he was above and away the winner. Iruka-sensei looked somewhat perturbed as he examined Naruto's combination of pitfall and tripwire projectile traps. By the time his demonstration was done, the course was covered in splashes of paint from the pellets they'd been given, and no less than 5 pitfalls were revealed. Very thorough, Iruka commented with a grimace. While all of that was fun enough, Naruto was looking forward to the last exercise the most. Taijutsu sparring. That was when he got a chance to prove he was the undisputed best in the class. All the matches had been set up with class rankings in mind, so he was the one that got to take on Sasuke. Naruto relished the opportunity. He hadn't been raised in the rivalry like Sasuke, but ever since he'd learned of his heritage, Naruto had dug up everything he could of the Senju. One of the biggest things he'd learned about was the rivalry with the Uchiha clan. Even after they'd founded the village, the two clans had competed. The desire to not let his clan down, and his self-appointed task to represent his former class, led to Naruto having an uncharacteristically serious attitude as the two squared off, though he still had nothing on Sasuke. Ever since they'd come so close in the target practice, Naruto had felt a pair of eyes on him. It wasn't too hard to look around and see Sasuke staring at him intensely. There was fire in the Uchiha's eyes, and as Naruto began to show his proficiency that surpassed his own in almost every category, his glare had intensified. Naruto felt his stomach tighten, an invisible pressure on his chest. The dirt underfoot was hard and cold. It was very early into spring, and the air was still slightly chilly. But Naruto couldn't feel it. The intensity in Sasuke's eyes had his own competitive juices flowing. When the match started, Sasuke charged in like a wild animal. He attacked with a flurry of speedy fists and lightning-quick kicks. But it was all predictable. Naruto easily deflected and countered Sasuke's attacks. He began to frown. This wasn't quite the epic fight he'd been expecting. Against a normal kid their age it was fine, but this wasn't good enough to overwhelm anyone of notable skill. His boredom was easy to see and seemed to enrage Sasuke all the more. Less than a minute in, Naruto wasn't having fun at all. He decided to end it on Sasuke's next rage-fueled punch. It was laughably easy to slip the punch. Grabbing hold of Sasuke's arm in a vice-like grip, Naruto twisted around and kicked the Uchiha's legs out from under him. Forced face first into the cold dirt, his arm twisted painfully behind him. Sasuke was defeated in under 2 minutes. If all you're gonna do is lose your temper, beating you isn't hard. I was expecting more, he commented. Naruto looked up at Iruka, his breath coming out in clouds of steam. I'd say that's match. Iruka nodded in surprise. Winner Naruto. The second the result was announced, Naruto released Sasuke. His opponent rose up with a furious expression. After glancing at their classmates, all muttering quietly about Naruto's easy win, the Uchiha stormed off to stand near a tree brooding. Naruto shook his head and went to join his classmates. He was greeted by a slap on the back from Kiba. Man, that was awesome. I've never seen someone handle Sasuke. It's usually the other way around. You're all right, Senju. Looks like making friends won't be an issue. Naruto watched the rest of his classmates fight, chatting with Kiba, as well as a chubby Akimichi boy. Surrounded by his new classmates, he paid little attention to the increasingly angry stare from Sasuke. Frustrating dreams filled Naruto's sleep. Demented moles, one black, the other white, popped in and out of the ground. They taunted him, switching places left and right. He cocked his arm back to swat one but was shunted aside as Sasuke tried to smack it himself, before chastising him for being in the way. Then a large wave of water swept over them. Naruto felt it swirling him about, filling his lungs. He couldn't breathe. Then it would repeat. Naruto woke up in a foul mood. An annoying tap-tap-tap had been what woke him up. It drilled into his head and drove him crazy. Above him hung the now familiar plaster ceiling of the cell. He was laying in his lumpy futon, the thin cotton blanket pulled over him. In the distance he could hear the quiet murmurs of some of the other special cell block denizens chatting. As his heart rate slowed, Naruto sat up with a groan. He felt that heavy, gross feeling of waking from an overly long sleep. Worse, his body was one giant bruise. The blanket fell away. He was wearing a plain t-shirt, just like he'd worn that first time he woke up here. Thankfully, he could see his clothes neatly folded at the foot of his bed. No need to worry about his wristbands. His mind slowly turned from his dream to the end of the fight. Ichiro seemed surprised. Come to think of it, that lightning didn't seem to affect me. Maybe there was something to ground it. Of course, thinking of the end of the fight made him think of how disastrous it had been. He stewed in his thoughts, his mood started to darken. The odd incident was quickly forgotten, in place of stewing over his failure. This was the second time he'd been completely overwhelmed in a fight in under a week. The twins might have been tricky, but they shouldn't have overwhelmed them. Of course, it didn't help when the person with eyes that could predict their moves completely tossed that aside to fight up close, rashly jumping in when he should have stayed back. Why couldn't Sasuke just listen? Even after becoming a team, you'd have more luck working with a mule than the Uchiha. As though summoned by his thoughts, he heard that annoying voice, full of condescension and arrogance. Sasuke was already awake, sitting up against the wall, fiddling with a kunai. So that was where the tapping came from. The discovery just made him all the more annoyed. Finally awake, I see. You really take laziness to a new level. Naruto felt his anger peak. He was like a pot, slowly simmering, ready to boil over. Better lazy than a reckless idiot that thinks he's the hottest shit around. You have something you want to get off your chest? Sasuke glared at him, his voice lowering. Naruto should have been the bigger man, should have realized they needed to cool it. But he was too heated. It wasn't just about the fight, or how Sasuke's hot-headedness had repeatedly screwed them over. He himself was guilty of that. No, it was all the months of needling, the years of Sasuke acting like he was better. He thought they'd moved past it after the bell test, but they'd just buried it, taking little sniping shots at each other. In this environment, cooped together, constant fear of discovery, his nerves were rubbed raw. It all came to the surface. Big talk from the guy who couldn't figure out he should be ranged support to take advantage of that fancy pink eye. Naruto was fuming, not thinking rationally. In the moment, he went for the thing he knew would cut deepest, something he'd usually never bring up. Call me lazy and dumb all you like, but you're so hard-headed and stupid you actually believe you have a snowball's chance in hell of killing your brother anytime soon. Naruto. Sasuke's voice came out in a growl. The boy clenched his fist, his arm muscles tensed and ready. At some point, Naruto couldn't remember when they'd gotten to their feet. It looked like they were going to come to blows. Naruto was fine with that. He wouldn't have any problem punching Sasuke's lights out. The jerk more than had it coming. Ever since they'd become genin, he'd barely paid lip service to working as a team, taking pot shots at Naruto. Though the worst part was poor Sakura. Naruto could take the snippety comments, he was used to the asshole's nonsense. Sakura, who had a crush on Sasuke, was not. His comments only served to undermine any confidence she might build. There was a tension in the air, and it was ready to snap, like a frayed rope about to give way. Just as it seemed they were actually going to fight, a low-pitched ahem from the cell door drew their attention. Haku stood at the entrance, a delicate black eyebrow raised and a somewhat sheepish expression on his face. Normally, I'd offer to come back later since I'm interrupting, but I think maybe I shouldn't. You two should really calm down. Fighting will just get them to activate the seal. Let's cool it, and you can try and talk things out. Naruto felt like a child being scolded. For a moment, it was like they were back in the academy, with Haku playing the role of Irika-sensei. He forced them to sit in a circle with Sasuke and himself across from each other. Naruto crossed his arms sullenly. Sasuke scowled at him. The mist shinobi looked back and forth between them. When it became clear neither was going to be the first to break the silence, Haku rolled his eyes and did it for them. I know you're arguing about your last fight, but it seems there's a bit more to it. I've always found getting things out in the open is helpful. Why don't you express what you're upset over? I assume it has something to do with your last fight. A grimace stole across Naruto's face. Really? We gotta get all touchy-feely? He complained. Haku stared at him down with a firm and unnerving gaze. He wasn't about to budge on this, and likely would just wait until they caved. For such a soft-spoken person, he could sure be scary when he was serious. All right, I'm pissed 'cause this idiot kept rushing in against those two when they're so much faster. Worse, he's still trying to pull that I'm better than everyone shit he always does. As if he's the best there's ever been when he clearly isn't. Sasuke looked like he wanted to interrupt, but he received a sharp look from Haku. Naruto poured out all his frustrations towards Sasuke. The way he always dismissed Naruto, insulted anyone who wasn't fanatically dedicated to training and incredibly strength. He hadn't meant to, it just happened. Afterwards it felt as if he'd unloaded the largest sack of potatoes ever from his shoulders. While angry at first, the more Naruto went on, Sasuke looked more contemplative. Once he was finished, Haku looked to Sasuke. The Uchiha shifted, mumbling under his breath. "Speak up." Naruto snapped. "I said I don't think I'm stronger than you." The words were quiet, spoken sullen and softly. Naruto recoiled as if slapped. Had Sasuke actually admitted that? It was absurd. Surely he had just gone insane. "It's not as if I don't know I'm no match for Itachi either. I am well aware of that." Sasuke clenched his fist. His nails dug deeply into the skin, drawing a trickle of blood. He stared a hole into Naruto's eyes. "That's why your laziness always pisses me off." Naruto frowned, for once more curious than angry. "I don't follow. How am I lazy?" "Of course you don't," Sasuke groused. "After the academy you were always hanging out, goofing off playing shogi. Meanwhile, I train myself to the bone, hours upon hours dedicated to it. Yet somehow you're still stronger than me. So yeah, it pisses me off that you've got so much potential yet seem to waste it while I'd kill to have that growth rate. Does he think I'm only ever hanging out? I mean, sure I hang out with Shikako and them, but I always have some clones training as well." Oh, Naruto had a startling realization. Sasuke had no way of knowing how his training worked. All this time he'd been assuming Naruto barely trained, unaware of the fact he was almost always training with his clones. Shadow clones were incredibly useful, able to transfer their memories and experiences, including rewriting the neural paths controlled by so-called muscle memory. He was one of the few that could handle the sheer chakra exhaustion and mental strain of training with them. All this time and animosity over a little misunderstanding. Naruto couldn't help but laugh. Sasuke, thinking he was mocking him, growled, "You think this is funny, dumbass?" Naruto wiped a non-existent tear. "Kinda, I just realized you actually think I don't train. That couldn't be further from the truth. I've got insane reserves. I use shadow clones to train. I'm the only person in the village who can do it and not ruin my chakra system. For every hour of training you do, I can do 20 or 30. When you realize that it's a little asinine to think you could keep up." Oh! With one simple word, the vitriol was drained from Sasuke. The black-haired boy looked a little nonplussed on how to move forward. Haku, meanwhile, smiled radiantly. "Good. It seems you two are making progress. Though on the issue of your last fight, you really shouldn't beat yourself up about it. Ichiro and Nejiro were notorious for their teamwork. It's beyond human." Naruto sighed, rubbing his eyes tiredly. "We still need to work together better. That's no excuse, not in here. That Ichiro guy called it, we can barely stand each other, let alone work as one." Sasuke agreed reluctantly. Haku gave a thoughtful hum. "I think you two need to find your reason." "Reason?" What did Haku mean? The ice user nodded emphatically. "Your reason for getting strong. You see, I believe you can only be truly strong when you have someone or something you want to protect. Twisted as they are, the twins have that. Even if you don't view each other that way, you too should think of something you want to protect, and let that desire drive you to do whatever you need to achieve that. Do that, and you can put differences aside for a greater good." There was something in his words that struck a chord with Naruto. Was that not exactly what he wanted to do? To become strong enough to protect everyone he held dear, and his family's legacy. His words reminded Naruto of what his grandfather said on the day of team assignments. He looked at his teammate. They weren't getting out of here on their own. They needed each other. He was willing to shove all the baggage aside, if it meant getting out of this damn prison. Naruto thrust his hand out. Sasuke looked at the hand oddly, like it was a strange creature he'd never seen before. "Seems we got off on the wrong foot all those years ago. What do you say? Want to try and be friends for the greater good?" Sasuke hesitated. For a long moment, Naruto thought he'd leave him waiting. Finally, After several tense heartbeats, Sasuke gripped his hand tightly. He gave Naruto a challenging smirk. Sure, dumbass. Though when we get out of here, I expect you to teach me that shadow clone jutsu. Sure thing. But don't whine to me if you hurt yourself. In return, I'm expecting ya to waste time, as you put it, with me and my other friends. Sasuke grimaced. Okay. Haku gave a brilliant smile as he watched them. The air was suddenly much lighter in the cell. Well, I'll be going now. See you two later. The long-haired boy gave a gentle wave, leaving Naruto and Sasuke alone. As his footsteps disappeared down the hall, Naruto gave Sasuke a serious look. Like you said, that Ichiro guy was right. This can't just be lip service. We have to have each other's backs at every step from here on out. Agreed. We also need to start planning for when we do crack the seal. Sasuke added. Naruto nodded readily. It was time to stop paying lip service and do what needed to be done. Together, they hammered out a plan. From now on, Naruto wouldn't just be working on cracking the seal. They'd save that for during the night when they couldn't be discovered. During the days, they would take shifts scouting the prison. They'd map it out and study the guard patrols. Those were surprisingly lax, probably due to the seals. With any luck, they'd have a total plan in place within a few days. All they'd be waiting for was the seal. Late that night, with only a stolen candle to light his work, Naruto lay on his stomach poring over his notes on the seal, scratching down a note on the seal's function. He growled quietly to himself as he found yet another dead end. This time he had been looking into the possibility of using a seal to trick the medical function into thinking the bearer was dead. Theoretically, that might cause it to disappear. But no such luck. There was something about this seal that truly vexed him. This thing is infuriating. There are bits that seem familiar, but for the life of me, I can't figure it out. What about you, Kurama? Surely, having been sealed in 2 sealing masters, the nine-tailed fox must have picked up quite a bit about sealing. At this point, Naruto would take any suggestion that might point him in the right direction. I agree. There's something very familiar about this design. But there's so much clutter on top of the original, it's impossible to make out. Kurama agreed. I'm as stumped as you. Naruto sighed in disappointment. The idea was a long shot, but he wouldn't quit. No matter what, he was going to crack this seal. His pride as a sealer wouldn't let him rest until he did. It was merely a matter of time. The subconscious mind was a powerful thing, capable of retaining information a person had long forgotten. It would scratch at the back of your head until it finally broke through. Hours later, when the prison lay dark as coal and silent as the grave, Naruto had a dream. Well, it was more of a memory, one that had slipped his mind. A memory of a time when his grandfather first taught him about his mother's clan's history with seals. Hokage Residence, October 1st, 988 AS. Naruto stared in childlike wonder as his grandfather showed him a seal. The air was quiet and still. The sliding paper doors to the sunroom had been closed to prevent any accident with the ink. They sat around a low-slung table on the tatami mat floor. His grandfather had just gotten done drawing the seal on a blank piece of paper. It was unlike anything he'd seen before. At its center lay a spiraling mark, surrounded by pronged circles of script. Recently, he'd begun to take interest in seals, especially when he learned his mother's clan was well known for them. This here is a basic in the Uzumaki style. The spiral symbol is a calling card, as it were. The dead giveaway that a seal originated from an Uzumaki. That's Mom's clan, right? Naruto interrupted with childlike excitement. Hiruzen, indulgent as ever, took it in stride. Yes, it is. Now today I'm going to teach you how to cut to the core of any Uzumaki seal. You see, their skills were so renowned. The clan always took great lengths to protect their work, often disguising the signature beneath layers of sealing. You'll be learning a unique array that will cut to the heart of an Uzumaki seal and let you see its true form. Naruto gasped in excitement. After practicing his calligraphy, they had gone through all the basics of sealing. How the arrays were formed, the effects different scripts had. They'd even gone over making a few basic seals like a storage seal and an explosive tag. This would be the first advanced seal he'd learn. He tilted his head curiously. But wait, How do you know it if it's an Uzumaki's secret Grandpa Hiru? The old man let out a rumbling chuckle. The first Hokage, your granduncle, was one of my teachers, as I'm sure you know. Hiruzen began. Naruto nodded. That had been one of the first things they learned in history class at the academy. Well, what is less known is that his wife, Lady Mito, was of the Uzumaki clan. She was responsible for creating the seals that power many of our defenses, namely, the barrier that warns us of intruders, and the seal that binds prisoners' chakra. Before her passing, she taught a select few the array to access the core of an Uzumaki seal, so we could maintain and modify her work. While Naruto was busy gaping in awe at the story, his grandfather picked up his calligraphy brush from the ink pot. A casual flick got rid of the excess, and he began to draw a seal on a blank piece of paper. In a few quick strokes, he'd drawn a spiked ring of symbols around a central dot. A quick application of chakra saw the seal instantly dried and primed. Naruto watched his grandfather with rapt attention. This is the seal we use on prisoners. Hiruzen drew a second seal around the first. A ring with 9 symbols, the 5 elements of Onmyoto: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water, interlocked with 4 spiral symbols. All of them were connected by a few links of script. That is the seal used to reveal an Uzumaki seal. As Hiruzen channeled chakra into the new seal, the old one suddenly transformed. The outer seal glowed before being sucked into the inner seal. In turn, the inner seal began to glow and expand. In an instant, the central dot expanded into a spiral mark, surrounded by 3 rings of spiked scripts. It was unlike anything Naruto had seen, complex beyond comprehension. But he could tell it was the work of a master. One by one, Hiruzen would go on to walk him through the elements of the seal. It was a masterpiece, modified from the Uzumaki's own chakra-suppressing seal. Everything was taken into account, from the vital signs of the bearer to the way it connected to the chakra network. The seal was beautiful and it was familiar. Present day, Naruto shot up in his futon, mind and heart racing. Any dregs of sleepiness were cast off, as he felt a sickening lurch in his stomach. Surely it wasn't possible. All the stories claim nothing was recovered. How could it possibly be that? He glanced around frantically. It was hard to tell time around here, but he'd guess it was near the crack of dawn. Plenty of time before the guards came. Naruto grasped for his wristband, unsealing a pot of ink and brush, as well as a stray piece of paper. With a deft, practiced hand, he copied down the seal he'd learned so long ago. He shook Sasuke awake frantically. "Sasuke, wake up. I need you to write this over my seal. Use your Sharingan to copy the result onto this paper." He urgently pressed the sheet into Sasuke's hand and offered up the pot of ink. At first, the Uchiha was upset, but when he saw the mix of excitement and panic on his face, Sasuke reluctantly grasped the small clay pot. Without prompting, Naruto peeled off his shirt and bared his back to Sasuke. The brush tickled, as Sasuke made the first few hesitant strokes. Before long, he picked up the pace. Then it was time to channel the chakra. The familiar agony of electricity racing through his veins hit Naruto, but he grit his teeth and pushed through the pain. After a few moments, the pain ended, and he collapsed forward, chest heaving for breath as his muscles twitched. Behind him, he could hear the scratch of the ink brush as Sasuke drew the seal. Naruto managed to gather his wits and put his shirt back on. Sasuke was just finishing his work as Naruto turned back around. The Uchiha wore a look of confusion as he passed Naruto the sheet of paper. "Mind explaining what this is about? What exactly is it I'm looking at?" His words fell on deaf ears. Naruto's eyes were fixated on the sheet of paper. There, in stark black ink, was a version of the Leaf Village seal. The spiral was surrounded by 5 spiked rings. It was barely recognizable, a patchwork monstrosity of seals meant to override and hijack the original. The sight made him feel ill. Damn. It's no wonder why this looked familiar. I'm no expert, but that doesn't look good. Kurama growled. Naruto nodded mutely in agreement. He licked his lips and finally addressed Sasuke's question. "I had a thought while I slept. This thing looked so familiar. That seal I had you use reveals the true form of any Uzumaki seal. This seal he's using, it's an Uzumaki seal. Worse, it's been so heavily modified it's ridiculous. Trying to unravel this thing would be like untying a tangled fishing line. A sense of despair overwhelmed Naruto. It was hard enough unraveling a regular Uzumaki seal, even for him. With one this heavily modified from its original function, he wasn't sure that he could remove this just yet. It might take several more weeks. That, or the destruction of the master seal it was connected to. That's not good, Sasuke said, unknowingly agreeing with Kurama. Silently, Naruto knew it was far worse than not good. The likelihood he could remove the seal was almost non-existent. Short of trying to ignore the seal and brute forcing their way out, he was dubious about the chance of escape. Not that he wouldn't try to remove it. Better get to work. Chapter 12. On the Trail. Hidden Leaf Village Training Ground Zero. April 9, 91 AS. It was a bright spring day, surprisingly warm. Anko found herself where she'd often been the past 10 months, overseeing her student as he trained. Student, ain't that a trip? Even in her head the word sounded odd. Anko had never planned to be a teacher, not in any capacity. She wasn't cut out for a relationship like that after the snake had betrayed her. At least, that's what she'd thought before the Hokage had all but forced her to become the sensei of Naruto Senju. Oi, brat, push it harder. I'm upping the weights tomorrow. You heal fast, so let's take advantage. Naruto gave her a tired nod, redoubling his squats. The boy groaned as his pace increased. His bangs were plastered to his forehead and his shirt was drenched in sweat. Anko smiled fondly, though she made sure the brat never saw it. At first, she'd resented him for the fact she was forced to train him. Then Kurenai had made a good point while Anko complained to her over tea and dango. It's not really fair to blame him. He's not the one that made you train him. I think you could relate, especially given his condition. Her friend's words had struck her hard, a harsh reminder of the way people had treated her. After that, she'd given the brat a chance, and he'd quickly grown on her with his attitude and drive. That's when she'd sworn, no matter what, she'd never turn out like him. She'd be there for her student no matter what. Katsuwara City, land of fog. Present day, Katsuwara was a bustling city, located at the heart of the land of fog. It was the second largest city in the country, a confusing tangle of streets lined with opulent casinos and luxurious hotels. Like Tenzaka Town in the land of fire, it was a center for gambling and other vices. A place where the people of all classes went to waste their money, though there were portions of the town devoted solely to the richest of the rich. But like every rich city, it had its seedier side. Rundown apartment buildings where workers lived, and a vast industrial district for producing and moving all the goods the casinos consumed, and where the seedier business was done. On the roof of one of those rundown apartment buildings, Anko crouched with her partner Turtle standing guard behind her. It was still day, but she could just imagine what the place must look like at night, when neon signs would blaze in the darkness and set things alight in a rainbow glow. Not a half hour earlier their team had arrived at Katsuwara. Turtle's initial lead had come from a wealthy lord at one of the casinos who had enjoyed a bit too much sake and let slip about an underground fighting tournament. The man himself had left town already, but he'd mentioned a particular merchant, a man named Kaji that sold rather questionable wares. So, their team had split up in pairs to search for him. If the merchant really was a middleman for selling tickets to this tournament, it would be a good place to recruit. Wolf and Bird had gone to search near the richest hotels. Kakashi and his student, meanwhile, had gone to look through the market district along with one of Kakashi's hounds. Anko and Turtle had taken up a stationary spot, using her snakes to scout the city without notice. Her thoughts were interrupted when she felt the familiar sensation of smooth, cool brown and green mottled scales sliding across her skin. A legless, muscular body coiled around her body until a snake poked its arrow-like head over her shoulder. "Whatcha got for me, Hebemaru?" The snake flicked its tongue and began to hiss. To normal people, that's all it was. As someone that had signed the contract of the Snake Clan, Anko could understand him perfectly. "I tracked the man to the east side of the city. He's currently at Warehouse 13. Seems to be where he stores his goods." Her summons disappeared into a puff of smoke. Anko heard the rustle of cloth behind her as her partner changed positions. Turtle hovered over her shoulder. The pale-skinned man had been silent, content to wait for one of her summons to return with news. "What's the news?" Turtle asked. Anko stood up. Her knees popped as they shifted for the first time in half an hour. She dusted her hands off. "We found him, Warehouse Inn on the eastern side of the city. Seems to be restocking. Connect me to everyone else." Her partner bobbed his head in agreement with Anko's order. With a quick ram seal, he reached over and placed his fingers on either side of Anko's head. She felt an odd, ticklish sensation in her mind, and suddenly she could feel the minds of their other teammates. He didn't bear the signature blonde hair of the Yamanaka, so most assumed Turtle was just a regular umbu. Incredibly skilled, but unremarkable. That made the job easier for him. "Oi, listen up, we've located the target. I want everyone to meet us at Warehouse 13, in the industrial section of town." "Understood," Wolf responded. Kakashi, lazy shit that he was, simply gave her the mental equivalent of a nod. How you could express a nod with a thought, she had no clue. The connection was quickly severed, and she and Turtle began to roof hop across the city. They were swift and silent, making sure nobody saw them. While technically they weren't doing anything wrong, it was always best not to openly advertise the presence of umbu in other countries. The journey wasn't long at all. In 5 minutes, she and Turtle stood in front of a tall warehouse. Warehouse 13 didn't stand out much, one of several that surrounded them. Made of bland concrete with rusted metal braces to support it. They were the last to arrive, having been the furthest away but just barely. Sakura was still blushing in embarrassment as she climbed off Kakashi's back. He clearly hadn't wanted to waste time. "He's in there?" Kakashi asked. Anko nodded. "Good. Let's scout the place and then move in. Thankfully, he's provided us with the perfect opportunity by coming to a place so isolated." "Wolf, get a feel for the layout." Wolf nodded and knelt down. He placed his fingers on the dirt road. Anko shivered as the tiniest ripple of chakra passed through her. After several moments of silence, Wolf spoke up. "There are 6 entrances, 2 in the front, 2 on either side. Typical shelf arrangement, the target is at the back in an office area, directly opposite us. Let's split up. We'll converge on him in 1 minute." Kakashi ordered. They spread out carefully, approaching from 3 different entrances, the main door and 2 side doors. Anko twisted the handle on the east side door carefully. She silently prayed it wouldn't make a sound. The door slid open soundlessly. She gave Turtle one last nod before they ducked through the entrance. Turtle made sure the door slid shut as silently as it opened. Inside, the warehouse was dark and cavernous. The only source of light was a few dim yellow lights hanging from the rusted rafters. Kaji's merchandise was stacked into 8 messy rows that towered to the ceiling. The 6 shinobi stalked between the shelves. Anko felt her pulse quicken as the sound of a scratching pen drew ever closer. Finally, she caught sight of their target through the shelves. Kaji was a small weasel of a man in shabby clothes that were meant to look expensive. His limbs looked slender and frail, and he had a pointed face, beady black eyes, and thinning brown hair. The man was at a worn-down desk, poring over a spreadsheet of items and expenses. It was painfully easy for Anko to sneak up behind him. She struck in an instant, right arm lashing out to cover the man's mouth, while holding a kunai. Kaji squealed, the sound muffled against her hand. His beady eyes darted around in panic as her teammates slipped out from between the shelves. "Easy there. We're just looking for some information," Anko crooned soothingly, though she pressed her kunai just a bit harder into the man's neck. "No point in struggling anyways. There's nobody to hear you scream. So why don't you be a good boy and keep quiet, so I don't have to spill that delicious blood all over the concrete floor?" Kaji bobbed his head frantically. When she moved the kunai away from his neck and released his mouth, the man sagged in relief. Voice cracking in distress, he asked, "What do you want?" "Like I said, just some information. See, a rich little birdie told us you've got a connection to a certain underground fight. Now, a few of our friends seem to have gone missing, so we're very interested in learning everything about it." The weaselly merchant squealed in fright. He looked as if he was about to piss himself. "I can't tell you anything. They'll kill me." "Well, It's a good thing we don't need your cooperation. Turtle, do your thing. Get as much info as you can. Enko tightened her hold on Kaji. He squirmed in fright as Turtle approached with his expressionless animal mask. Turtle placed his hand onto the merchant's head, and the man went rigid in her grasp. He gave the occasional twitch as Turtle began to dig through his mind. Usually they'd do this more gently, but they were short on time. After a few minutes, the Umbu released their prisoner, who collapsed face first into the desk as Enko let him go. Kaji's skin was clammy and pale. He shivered from the experience of having his mind torn through. Top drawer on the right-hand side, there's another ledger. Kaji made to sit up in a panic, but Enko slammed his head back into the desk harshly. With her free hand, she yanked open the drawer Turtle mentioned. Just as he said, directly on top was a second leather-bound ledger with delivery addresses. Turtle flipped open the ledger to the third page and pointed to a particular address. Here, in the Sen Mountains, that's where he's been making the deliveries to. Isolated, perfect for this kind of thing. Unfortunately, he doesn't know much about the fights themselves or who runs them. Though there was one notable thing, there are a lot of wisteria trees. Enko grinned savagely. Oh, are there now? Under her hand, Kaji whimpered. The frail man began to hyperventilate. Under his breath, the man began to say the same thing over and over. They're going to kill me. I'm dead. Enko patted Kaji on the back soothingly. No need to worry, buddy. They aren't going to kill you. Face still pressed against the rough wooden grain of his desk, Kaji looked up at her hopefully. They won't. Enko quickly and gleefully cut that hope short. Nope, 'cause we're gonna beat 'em to it, she said grimly. The merchant tried to scream, but one quick jerk of her hand and the deed was done. Sakura stifled a scream as his blood sprayed across the desk. She looked as if she'd be sick, and her horrified eyes couldn't look away from the steadily growing pool of blood. It was probably the first time the poor girl had seen someone killed in cold blood. First kill and first time with this. If she can keep it together, she'll be pretty resilient after this. Enko looked at Bird. Dispose of the trash. Make sure everything gets cleaned up. As Bird hurried to do his task, Enko noticed Kakashi studying the ledger with a shrewd look. He plucked something from the book, a red business card, with the image of a tiger and dragon fighting stamped across it in gold leaf. It had been pinned to the ledger with a paperclip. Say, Turtle, what is this for? An ID for new patrons of the fights. Why? Kakashi gave a thoughtful hum. I swear I've seen this emblem somewhere before. Not sure where. Doesn't matter, we can figure it out later. Now that we know where the kids are, we gotta hurry. Enko replied. The Jonin nodded, though he didn't seem entirely convinced. Enko didn't care. After several days, they were finally in reach of their goal. The second bird returned, she wanted to leave. Their journey to reach the mountain was not a long one. Several hours at most for a shinobi. The air got colder as they ascended into the mountains. Fog floated in roaming clouds, dampening their clothes as they swept by. Lush wetland fields gave way to a thick forest of pine and oak trees. 2 miles away from the site of the supposed mansion, they came to a halt amidst a clearing surrounded by towering oaks. Sakura nearly collapsed the second they stopped. She looked half dead, the back of her cheapao drenched in sweat, skin clammy as she braced against her knees while panting. Enko felt sympathy for the girl. She'd been pushing herself past her limits to keep up with the Jonin and doing an admirable job, all things considered. They'd been limited to around the speed of a chunin, which was more than she'd been expecting when she first laid eyes on the pink-haired slip of a girl. Kakashi spared his genin a glance before getting to business. All right, Enko, I want you to scout ahead. Take Wolf and Turtle with you. Enko nodded in agreement. Their skills would be useful in assessing the situation. She nudged the Inuzuka. Together, they slipped away into the trees. Here, where the trees towered high and fog was a near constant, there wasn't much light for shrubbery to grow. She made sure to rein in her chakra, imagining as if it was a ball of light and squeezing until it was tiny and unnoticeable. It wasn't a pleasant sensation, as if she was constantly holding back a sneeze, but it helped to counter Sensor's abilities. A useful technique to know, though the thought of the one who taught it to her left a bitter taste in her mouth. Finally, The trees parted way onto a wide dirt road. A second road, lined with wisteria trees, led to a sprawling estate. A tranquil lake that stirred in the breeze, and vast gardens of handsomely groomed shrubs as far as you could see. And at the center lay a luxurious mansion that looked like it might once have been a castle, but since then all form of defensive capability had been eschewed for opulence. It was painted crimson red, with large banks of glittering windows reflecting the white haze. Intricate carvings lined the eaves of the tiled roofs of its several wings. One wind in particular stood out aside from the rest, a newer addition. Anko glanced at Turtle. "Is this the place?" Her teammate nodded. "Yeah, that's it all right. And look at that, wisteria trees." Anko eyed the trees, decoratively placed on either side of the road leading up to the estate. Just like the dog said. She nodded in satisfaction. This definitely had to be the place they were looking for. "Wolf, do your thing. Get a layout." Wolf nodded and knelt to the ground. He placed his fingers to the ground and closed his eyes. For several seconds he was completely still, then his eyes snapped open. There's an underground structure under the mansion. One level with a large arena in the center. There are 4 major exits, 3 of them connected to the arena. "I'll memorize the layout and draw a map." "Good work," Anko told him. She was just about to order a retreat when the man pointed to the guards, more specifically, their headbands. "What's that symbol they're wearing? I don't recognize it." She squinted, straining her eyes to see. Taking a risk, she channeled a tiny sliver of chakra to increase her perception just slightly. It was no Sharingan, but she could still make things out with clearer detail. Instantly, Anko had to bite back a curse as she saw the 3 gentian flowers over bamboo leaves. She wasn't the savviest when it came to politics, but it was important for interrogators to know as much about foreign powers as possible, especially noble families. Could their luck really be so bad? She turned to Turtle. "Is that what I think it is?" The bald man nodded grimly. Her stomach sank. They couldn't just go rushing in as she'd have liked. The stakes were much, much too high. This just got a lot more complicated. Chapter 13. And God laughs. The prison lay quiet and still. All the shinobi were in their cells sound asleep. Well, almost all. In his cell, Naruto was wide awake. The quiet scratch of his pencil blended with the loud snores of Danjiro a couple cells down. He worked by the dim yellow light of a seal he carved into the wall. It wasn't much, but it was enough to let him work. Sasuke kept watch silently, knees curled to his chest as he stared into the semi-dark corridor. 13 days. They'd been in that Minamoto prick's private prison for nearly 2 weeks. At this point, Naruto had to put more weight into the possibility that their team might not find them. It was very possible Itojiro had covered his tracks too well. That just made his work all the more important. Over the past 5 days, he'd made a bit of progress. At least enough to loosen the restriction on their chakra some. That had made their scouting efforts more successful as he could create clones to transform into animals and explore the prison. So far, they had made a fairly complete map of the level. Though they'd yet to find any other entrances besides the stairs and the staff exits, all of which were heavily guarded. Naruto made another note on his breakdown of the bastardized prisoner seal. With a sigh, he set the pencil down and rubbed his tired eyes. He should probably get to sleep. It wouldn't do to be tired if he had a fight tomorrow. Naruto placed a finger to the light seal. Chakra pulsed through it, shutting the light off. "Any luck?" Naruto groaned as he started to seal away his materials. "A little. There's still an issue with the timing between shutting off the kill switch and the redundant motor restriction array. Both have to be deactivated and removed at once, and that's tricky." Sasuke clicked his tongue in annoyance. "Guess we'll have to continue tomorrow. Think Minamoto is still looking forward to our fights." A snort of laughter escaped Naruto. He wasn't quite used to Sasuke having a sense of humor. They'd fought once each since the team fight, though neither on the same night. Ever since they came to an agreement, they'd put minimal effort into the fights. When they broke out, they didn't want the enemy to have more knowledge of their skills than necessary. Not to mention it kept them fresh and uninjured, which meant more time to study the prison layout. Naruto's third opponent had been taken care of swiftly. A slash to the ground to kick up dust and a chop to the back of the neck had gotten the trick done. Sasuke had been even faster in his fight, using a genjutsu with his Sharingan to put the woman he faced to sleep. According to the Uchiha, Takaru hadn't looked very pleased after that last one, though it had cost them a visit and some punishment from the seal. The next day the two got up to their usual tricks, using Naruto's disguised clones to scout the layout of the prison. At this point, the only area they hadn't been able to explore was the arena itself. Naruto resolved to plant some transformed clones during his next fight. That evening, he got his chance. After a day where he discreetly timed the guard patrols and spent time reading from the admittedly limited selection in the library, Naruto had returned to his cell. He was contemplating a nap to get some extra rest when someone pounded on the wooden cell door. "Oi, Naruto, you're fighting tonight. You can stay put, Uchiha. You've got the night off." Naruto glanced up to see Denki, a guard he'd become familiar with. He was a little soft in the midsection. His gray uniform shirt stretched a little too tight, with thinning blonde hair and a mustache. The man wasn't terrible, a bit of a hard ass, but he was fair. He had a wife and daughter at home. Naruto had overheard him bragging about his daughter glowingly. "Well, I'll be back in a bit," Naruto told Sasuke, who was lying on his stomach reading a book from the library. The Uchiha grunted but didn't turn around. Naruto pushed himself out of his futon and dusted off his hands, before following after Denki. He didn't actually need the guide anymore, but there was no chance they'd let him wander to the arena on his own, though it didn't escape his notice that the number of guards they sent to fetch them had decreased. "We've been quiet, aside from needling him. Hopefully Minamoto is letting his guard down." His match was halfway through the night's event. Naruto exited the tunnel, to the familiar roar of boos from the crowd. They hadn't warmed up to him and Sasuke at all. They'd quickly become the villains of the fights. He'd gotten used to it. The bright lights bore down hotly on the floor. There were already drying patches of blood, turning the dirt to mud. The smell of iron mixed oddly with the smell of fried noodles and other delicious foods. The noise faded into the background, and he only focused on his opponent. Across from him stood a mostly unremarkable man. Short brown hair, dark eyes, not very tall or very short, nor fat or thin. The only exception was a nasty scar over his right eye. He wore a long-sleeved red top and black pants. The man offered him a thin-lipped smile and introduced himself. "I'm Tsubasa. Apparently Lord Takaru wants me to draw a good fight out of you." "Well, good luck with that." Their fight was as unremarkable as his opponent's appearance. Tsubasa's first move was to perform the Tiger Seal and unleash a basic fireball jutsu. It was strong, but nothing compared to even Sasuke's. He easily deduced what Takaru's angle was. "Make me face a fire user to cancel out the wind. I could overpower it with wind, but that'd just give him the show he wants." Naruto felt mischievous, so instead of countering with a jutsu, he eyed the gap between the fireball and the ground. With nimble flexibility, he curled into a ball and rolled underneath the flames. The heat on his back was intense, but it didn't burn. While the glare of the fire obscured it, Naruto created a pair of clones in the form of rats. They scurried to safety unnoticed as he rolled to the other side of the fireball. On the other side, he came out of his roll. Quick as a flash, he dashed towards his opponent. Another quick chop to the back of the neck ended it. As he left the arena, Naruto glanced up to Takaru, who wore a furious expression. He gave the man a cheeky wink, holding back laughter as he entered the dark tunnel. After the usual process of returning his pouch and sword, Naruto made his way back to his cell. When he got back, Sasuke glanced up. He saw the grin on Naruto's face and groaned. "What did you do now?" I poked the bear a little. Takaru thought he'd draw a fight out of me by putting a fire-style user against me. So, I didn't use any jutsu and ended it quick-like." Sasuke rolled his eyes. "If you keep antagonizing him, it's probably going to backfire on us. We don't want the guard routines changing up." Naruto shrugged off Sasuke's words. This was the first time he'd outright tried to annoy Takaru. Though maybe he'd take Sasuke's advice into account and try to please Takaru just slightly in the next fight. He'd still be careful not to get injured. That evening, after they'd faked going to bed, they were up once more. As Sasuke stood guard, Naruto's mind was split between the task at hand and something he'd been contemplating for several days. "Hey, Sasuke, What do you think about letting Haku in on the plan? Why? Sasuke sounded curious, so he wasn't just denying the idea out of hand. Naruto paused mid-stroke as he took notes on the seal. I mean, he's been nothing but helpful. I think he's pretty trustworthy. Naruto could see Sasuke wasn't convinced, so he added, plus, even if we remove our own seals, it'd just be us if anything went wrong. Having one more person could be useful. Huh. Guess you're right. Both of them knew Sasuke was mostly humoring him, but Naruto didn't mind. Ever since they'd been here, Haku had been a good friend. He'd helped them out and proven himself to be kind and trustworthy. He couldn't stand the thought of just escaping and leaving Haku. It turned his stomach to even consider it. Good. Let's tell him tomorrow. Naruto got back to working on the seal. There was a new vigor. He couldn't wait to tell Haku. The next day, Naruto led Haku to their cell under the pretense of talking more about the hidden mist. They'd waited until most of the prison residents were having lunch in the cafeteria. Haku seemed to sense something strange the second he stepped into the small room. He glanced around, likely noting the lack of sound. Every other resident of the block was gone, leaving them in relative silence. Something tells me you don't want to talk about my village, Naruto. Sorry about tricking ya, but we wanted to let you in on something we've been working on. Haku frowned thoughtfully. Let me in on something? Naruto glanced to Sasuke. If they'd misjudged Haku, this could blow up in their faces. But he had faith they were making the right choice. Sasuke gave him an approving nod. Yeah, we're planning to escape this place, and we wanted to know if you wanted in. Haku's gaze sharpened. For once, he looked every bit a shinobi. Explain, they did. After sitting down, Naruto relayed the plan so far to Haku as best he could, with help from Sasuke, who'd been mostly responsible for keeping track of the information on guard patrols and the prison layout. 15 minutes later, they were showing Haku the map and going over the plan. From what we can figure, the guards are thinnest the day after a fight night. Our best guess right now is some of them escort VIPs home. That, or it has something to do with the fighters that occasionally disappear. Naruto explained. The three shared a grim look. Haku, who had been here longer, had pointed out the fact fighters occasionally disappeared after big fights. It had happened after Naruto's second fight. A man with a bloodline that let him extend and contract his fingers at will just disappeared overnight despite surviving his fight. Given how Takaru talked about them, there were two possibilities. Either he grew bored of his toys and had them disposed of, or more likely he sold them off. According to Haku, this wasn't the only suspected illegal arena in the continent. Sasuke spoke up next. We plan to escape on one of those days, when we'll have the least resistance. It should be easy to slip out, hopefully. After his last fight, Naruto found secret exits for the guests at the arena. Sasuke pointed to the drawing of the arena on the map and two squares on either side of it. They had just been filled in last night. That's where we're going to escape, since it will be an area they won't think needs guarding. Haku nodded with a thoughtful expression. Might I make a suggestion? Naruto nodded easily enough. What if you released the rest of the prisoners at the same time? Surely that would cause a large distraction, which will make it easier to slip out unnoticed. Though the suggestion was framed such that it sounded like a tactical move, Naruto could see through it. He'd known him for only a couple of weeks, but already Naruto could tell the kind of person Haku was. Like Choji, he was much kinder than was normal for a shinobi. No doubt he wanted to make sure everyone had a chance at escape instead of just leaving them. Internally, Naruto was grateful. He too had been wrestling with that idea, though he hadn't brought it up to Sasuke. Luckily, the Uchiha seemed amenable to it. That sounds like a good idea, we'll add it to the plan. We'll wait for the guards to come and unlock the cells for the day. It'll be the perfect time to release them without anyone realizing. The three chatted for a while longer, namely about how Haku could fit into the day-to-day plans. He had much greater leeway than either of them, so the mist shinobi could be places that might seem suspicious if he or Sasuke were to linger. Eventually, though, Haku had to leave. The boy stood, stretching his limbs. I'll see you two later. I have a fight to get ready for. They came by and told me this morning. Apparently, I'm the main event. Sounds good. Good luck with the fight. For the first time since they'd been there, neither Naruto nor Sasuke had a fight during the event, which provided a unique opportunity. During fights, there was hardly anyone in the special cell block. It was the perfect chance to work on the seal during the day. So, Naruto hunkered down in the darkest corner of the cell, where it was hard to tell what he was doing. He didn't dare use his light seal. Sasuke took up position leaning casually against the door. Naruto was tenser than usual as he examined his most recent notes on the seal. How could he possibly find a way to remove the kill switch array and body restriction at the same time? Normally it wouldn't be so tricky, but the body restriction array ran off a constantly shifting timer. Could activate 5 seconds after the kill switch or 5 milliseconds. There was also the issue of severing the seal's connection to the nervous system. A shame it's not as simple as locking it up, like your dumbass father did with me. Kurama commented, "Remind me which one of you is the one sealed inside a 14-year-old. I wonder who's really the dumbass." Naruto took amusement in Kurama's annoyed growl. He was right though. It was a shame he couldn't just lock the seal up. Unfortunately, that could make it harder to remove later. If only I could just suppress the function somehow. Naruto's eyes widened. He was struck with sudden inspiration. Deep in the recesses of his mind, he felt a memory stir. Training Ground 4, Hidden Leaf Village, 993 AS. The sun hung high in the sky, casting harsh rays over the village. It was the hottest day of the year so far. At Training Ground 4, Naruto and Anko had taken a break from their taijutsu practice to take a dip in the river. They rested on the edge of the bank, legs trailing in the cool water as their bodies dripped onto the hard-packed dirt. The sun-baked grass felt like bristles under his palms. Goosebumps rose on his skin as a light breeze trailed across his wet legs. Naruto stole the occasional glance at Anko when she wasn't looking. At first, he'd been embarrassed when the woman had shamelessly stripped down to just her mesh armor suit. The suit hadn't lasted much longer. He'd closed his eyes to avoid seeing her chest. As it turned out, she wore a flesh-colored sports bra and matching spats. But it wasn't the woman's figure that had him fascinated. No, his attention was drawn to a mark on her neck. 3 black tomo, inside a seal that reminded him a bit of his 8-trigram seal, though with 6 spikes instead of 8. "You can't seem to stop staring, brat. Do you have a crush or something?" Anko had caught him. She wore a teasing smirk. "No!" Naruto insisted as he blushed, and shook his head in denial, though he couldn't meet her eyes. Anko's smirk grew. She leaned forward, invading his space. "Are you sure?" Naruto nodded emphatically. In an instant, Anko moved back to where she'd been. "Good. That'd be pretty annoying." He tried not to let her words sting too much. Much as he denied it, Naruto did have a bit of a crush on his teacher. But it wasn't like he intended to mention it. Ever. Though he suspected Anko knew, her job was getting information from people, after all. "So, if you weren't interested in my chest, why were you staring?" Naruto's eyes flitted to her mark, then quickly away. I was curious about that mark. It looks like some sort of seal inside a seal." Anko's cheerful expression melted off her face. Her hand snapped up, quickly covering the mark. She looked at him moodily. "Those are some sharp eyes you got, brat." Naruto flinched. She sounded upset, more than he'd ever heard. Anko had chewed him out plenty, but he'd never heard the pure anger in her voice like just then. Seeing his flinch, Anko's expression softened. "Don't worry, kid. I'm not mad at you. Can't blame ya for being curious." Anko frowned as she stared into the gently moving river. "That mark is a gift from my scumbag sensei. His name was Orochimaru. You might have heard of him. He's one of the Sannin. The seal around it helps keep it in check." He had heard of Orochimaru and the rest of the Sannin. They'd learned about them in history. Naruto had always been more interested in the other 2, Jiraiya, who taught his father, and Tsunade, who was his second cousin. Naruto had heard rumors about Orochimaru, supposedly the genius of the trio. One of the boys in his first class, had claimed his father said Orochimaru betrayed the village by doing inhumane experiments. Naruto was hesitant to ask more, but his curiosity was too great. "What does it do?" "It's called the Cursed Seal, and it lets the bearer use a powerful form of chakra. The caveat is it corrupts ya. Use it too much, and you'll become as sick and twisted as my sensei." The thing was prone to acting up, so Lord Hokage used the evil sealing method to bind it. As long as my will stays strong, I don't have to worry about this thing. Anko rubbed her shoulder ruefully as she spoke. Abruptly, Anko shot to her feet. She towered over him, with her usual lopsided grin. All right, enough about that. Back to taijutsu training. But I still want to take a look at that evil sealing method. It sounds interesting. Naruto whined. Anko rolled her eyes. Tell ya what, you managed to go 5 minutes of grappling training, and I'll let you take a look, you little nerd. Naruto grinned. He was definitely going to win that challenge. He couldn't wait to get a chance to examine such an interesting seal that could suppress another. Though there was just one problem. Aren't we gonna get redressed first? Blood Arena Prison Special Cells. Present day. Naruto let out a gasp of shock. Could it really be that simple? He'd been trying so hard to remove the seal. Simply suppressing it hadn't even crossed his mind. Obviously, he couldn't just use the evil sealing method, it would have to be modified. But still, it could work. He frowned, clutching his chin as he examined the bastardized Uzumaki seal. Sasuke glanced over from the dimly lit doorway. He seemed to sense something had shifted. Oi! What's going through that brain of yours? I think I figured out a way to deal with the seal. You found a way to remove it? Sasuke asked quickly. Naruto shook his head. No, but I might be able to suppress it, which is the next best thing. If it works out, we can escape without it activating. That might be the best we can do. This seal is just too complex to remove, not without a lot of time. A while ago, you said this thing was anchored to someone, right? Sasuke asked. Naruto could practically see the wheels turning in his head. Yeah. Probably Takaru if I had to guess. Well, I don't really want to walk around with this seal on me until you figure out how to remove it. I say when we escape, Takaru should suffer an accident to remove the seals. Naruto frowned. Are you crazy? The second they know it's a prison break, it's going to be impossible to get to him. He'll be the one most heavily guarded. We can't risk it. He could see where Sasuke was coming from. Still, the idea was risky. But the Uchiha wouldn't budge, and eventually Naruto caved and agreed to his demand. Fine, we can try to do it. But if he's too heavily guarded, we run, agreed? I guess I can agree to that. Sasuke accepted the agreement reluctantly. Thus, he found himself sitting down with the new idea in mind. Adjusting the evil sealing method to suppress the prisoner seal shouldn't actually be that hard. He could use the revealing seal as a base to work on. I'll have this hammered out in no time. Can't wait to tell Haku about this. To Naruto's surprise, within hours he had the beginnings of a decent rudimentary attempt at his suppression seal. He'd worked diligently writing and rewriting the design. The time had flown by. Combining the evil sealing method with the revealing seal actually proved easy. All he had to do was link the evil sealing method's suppressing mechanism into the revealing seal's mechanism for unraveling a seal's functions. It made it easy to infiltrate the complicated tangle of seals Takaru had created. The only slight problem was he had to find a way to make the suppressing seal easier to apply than either of the seals he was using to create it. Preferably, it could be applied with a tag. That would make it less permanent, but given their plan to assassinate Takaru, hopefully that wouldn't matter. He tried to ignore the concerned flutter in his stomach. Naruto was still dubious about that idea. In order to distract himself, he thought of how excited Haku would be when he learned about the breakthrough. Actually, now that I think about it, hey Sasuke, don't you think the fights should have been over by now? Sasuke grunted thoughtfully. Now that you mention it. Yeah. Suddenly, the Uchiha perked up and hissed out a warning. Quick, hide everything. He didn't bother to question what had tipped Sasuke off. Quick as a flash, Naruto swiped up his supplies and they disappeared in a puff of smoke. The smoke had cleared away by the time he heard the first footsteps. They waited in tense silence as the footsteps grew closer. Finally, the lanky figure of Itojiro slinked around the corner. For once, he wasn't wearing his mask. He bore a savage grin, and his dark eyes danced with sadistic glee as he looked at them. Well, if it isn't the little leaf shinobi. Long time no see. Hope you've been having a productive stay. Naruto didn't dare breathe. Did Itojiro know? How? They'd been so careful to avoid notice. What do you want? Sasuke asked sharply. Now, why so serious? The madman chuckled. I just came by to share some news. About that little friend of yours, Haku. Naruto looked at the man angrily. What about him? Do you know why he isn't back yet? A part of him, deep down, wondered if Haku had turned them in. Seconds later, he felt sick for even thinking it. Itojiro's mad grin widened. As it happens, I do. See, little Haku had an accident during his fight. He's currently in the infirmary in serious condition. Chapter 14. The escape begins. An accident? Naruto felt a ball of lead drop into his stomach. No way was it an accident. Not with the pleasure Itojiro was taking in delivering the news. Besides, Haku was too skilled to be beaten by anyone in the prison. Naruto had yet to see him get so much as a scratch from a fight. Something was amiss. Across the cell, Sasuke voiced what Naruto was thinking, though he seemed more angry than stunned. What did you do? Itojiro chuckled. The sick man delighted in their concern. Oh, I didn't do anything. There was just a malfunction with the boy's seal during the fight. His opponent landed a nasty blow while he was stunned. The lanky giant gave them a mocking wave. Well, I just wanted to tell you about your friend. Maybe you should check on him. So long, little leaf shinobi. The man departed. His lanky shadow slid across the wall as he walked away. As soon as Itojiro was out of sight, Naruto shot to his feet. Sasuke did the same. Without needing to communicate it, they both began to race towards the infirmary. Together, they dodged around fellow prisoners who were milling about the atrium. In seconds, Naruto was across the atrium. He pried the door open and slipped inside. Sasuke was right behind him. He let out a sigh of relief as he instantly saw Haku sitting up in his hospital bed. His abdomen wrapped in white bandages stained slightly pink. A slightly pudgy nurse tended to him. She glared at Naruto and Sasuke. Don't just come barging in, we're treating patients. Haku waved away her concerns. Sorry, miss. They're my friends, just coming to check on me. The nurse eyed them suspiciously, before she left with a huff. Naruto stepped up to Haku's bedside and looked him over more closely. Aside from the bandages and some bruises, he seemed well enough. What happened? I was about to win when my seal activated. As you can see, my opponent took advantage. Haku gestured towards the stained bandages. Sasuke scowled and crossed his arms. I don't like this. It's too great a coincidence. The Uchiha broke off his sentence as the double doors to the infirmary swung open. They banged against the wall loudly. Takaru strutted in, flanked by Ichiro and Nejiro. The man wore a slimy grin. Dressed in black and gold robes, he gave off an air of smugness that permeated the room like a foul stench. My Haku. So terrible to see you injured. His nasally voice was thoroughly insincere. More sarcastic than anything. Naruto clenched his fist angrily. Why'd you activate Haku's seal? Takaru offered him a thin-lipped smile. His eyes flashed dangerously. Now, why would you make such a nasty accusation? I think someone needs a reminder of his place. Naruto bit back a scream as he felt the familiar pinprick sensation of electricity racing through his veins. His muscles quivered as he braced himself against Haku's bed. There, that ought to make the lesson sink in. Speaking of which, he stalked forward and bent over to whisper into Naruto's ear. From now on, I expect you and Sasuke to put on much more entertaining fights. Or next time your friend might have a fatal accident. Rather foolish to make such an exploitable weakness so obvious. Do we understand each other? He stared into Takaru's eyes. All Naruto wanted to do was sock the smug look off his face. But he couldn't. Yes, excellent. The rich man stood abruptly and motioned for Ichiro and Nejiro to fall into line behind him. Naruto stared after him hatefully. Sasuke furrowed his brow. What did he say? That bastard activated Haku's seal to teach us a lesson. He wants us to have more entertaining fights. Naruto hissed. He was angry. Angry at Takaru for activating the seal. Angry at Itojiro for capturing them. Most of all, he was angry at himself. They'd been short-sighted, antagonizing Takaru. Of course the bastard would retaliate. The question is, what will you do about it? Naruto closed his eyes and took a breath. Anger wouldn't get them anywhere, not on its own. Slowly his rage turned to determination. When he opened his eyes, he looked at Haku and Sasuke with a fiery gaze. I'm completing the seal tonight. Tomorrow we're escaping. Are you sure? Sasuke looked dubious. He nodded resolutely. There was no doubt in his mind. He could push through and finish the seal. It was just a matter of effort and execution. Naruto turned to Haku. You think you can manage if we do it tomorrow? The long-haired boy shifted in his bed with a wince. Yes, don't worry about me. Sasuke nodded. All right then, let's get back to the cell. They said their goodbyes to Haku and went on their way. As they exited the room, they came face to face with Ichiro, who gave them a smirk and a sarcastic wave. The black-haired boy walked away without a word. Sasuke stared after him wearily. You think he heard? Naruto shook his head slowly. No way to be sure. Even if he did, it doesn't change anything. I have to complete the seal as soon as possible. Let's go. Once they got back to their cell, Naruto got straight to work. It was already late enough he could begin without worry. He channeled his anger, used it as fuel. Everything just clicked. In a state of creative flow, he started to connect all the different portions of his counter seal. Bridging formulas were created in mere minutes, and slowly the seal started to take shape. Hours later, when the prison was quiet and cool, Naruto finally set down his ink brush. Before him lay several stacks of sealing tags. They bore his finished seal. 5 jagged flame-like spikes of compressed script, interspersed with the Sasuke peered over his shoulder at the tags. So that's it. They'll work? Naruto nodded. He was confident it would work. His paper test had shown it could suppress the seal. Yes, now let's apply the full thing to ourselves. It'll be more permanent than the tags. At his direction, Sasuke took of his shirt. Naruto channeled chakra into his tooth and nipped his thumb. As blood started to ooze out, he dipped his ink brush in the red liquid. He quickly and precisely drew the symbols on Sasuke's body around the prisoner seal. Some of the script trailed across the ground. When he was finished, Naruto stood up. Careful to avoid smudging any script, he placed his hand on the prisoner seal and channeled chakra into it. Sasuke hissed as the containment seal glowed red. It began to rapidly shrink, forming the completed seal around the prisoner seal. Now, follow the notes and do the same. Naruto passed Sasuke his ink brush and the stack of notes with the full sealing formula. After taking off his shirt, he waited patiently while Sasuke drew the seal. The brush tickled as it traced across his skin. Finally, Sasuke activated the seal. Naruto felt the script heat up as it crawled across his skin and withdrew. The two put their shirts back on and lay back on their futons. As he stared up at the ceiling, Sasuke said, "Tomorrow is the day." Naruto nodded. "Yep. Now get to sleep." Sleep came hard. Naruto tossed and turned restlessly. In between the fits of restlessness and excitement, he snuck a few hours of rest. In the wee hours of the morning, he and Sasuke woke and prepared themselves silently. They checked their supplies and, once satisfied, pretended to be asleep. They had to wait for the guards to come. To Naruto, it seemed like hours before he heard the now familiar heavy footsteps and jangle of keys. The key scraped against the lock, followed by the scraping of wood as the cell door was opened. "Oi, door's open." A familiar gruff voice spoke. Why did it have to be him? Naruto wondered. When they didn't answer, Denki stepped into the cell hesitantly. "Hey, brats, what's up? You're usually awake by now." Naruto squeezed his eyes shut. He hesitated to act. Don't notice. Denki, just kick him awake. Ain't got time for this." His partner shouted. "Just a minute, Zenji." Denki threw over his shoulder. His footsteps drew closer. They stuttered to a stop, and Naruto felt his stomach drop. "Hey, wait a minute." He acted in the blink of an eye. Naruto threw the covers off. He was on Denki before he could react, a blade protruding from his palm and piercing the man's neck. The second guard tried to activate the seal, but it didn't work. "What the hell?" Sasuke got on him and silenced him before he could make any noise. Naruto felt a spark of regret as he watched Denki dying. He thought of the man's wife and daughter. They'd be on their own now. "Damn it. I really wish you hadn't been the one coming to wake us." He closed his eyes and looked away, unable to stand the look of panicked desperation in the man's eyes. Save the sentiment for later. Focus on the mission, Naruto. Kurama chided him. I am. Naruto snapped back. He clenched his fist to halt the trembling in his hand. After shaking his head, he glanced to Sasuke, who waited by the door. You ready? Naruto nodded firmly. Without speaking, they transformed into the pair of guards. With another hand seal, Naruto created 30 clones and began to hand out a stack of sealing tags. There was no need to give them instructions. They knew what he wanted. As the clones spread out, he looked to Sasuke and nodded. Together, they walked down the special cell block. The clones weaved in and out around them, darting into cells and slapping tags onto prisoners with quick explanations. They entered the atrium and immediately moved towards the infirmary. It was empty, save for a pair of guards near the doors to the stairs. Naruto tried not to move too fast. Morning, Zenji, Denki. One of the guards greeted. Naruto grunted and nodded. They finally reached the infirmary. He just seized the handle when a panicked shout rang through the prison. They're escaping. The prisoners are escape. It cut off with a wet gurgle. For a single instant, the prison stood silent. Then chaos erupted. Shouts rang through the halls and guards began to rush toward the regular cell block. He took advantage of the situation to slip through the door to the infirmary. It snapped closed behind Sasuke, insulating them against the uproar just slightly. The infirmary was nearly empty, save for Haku resting on his bed and a panicked nurse. Oh, thank goodness you're here to protect us, she exclaimed with a hand resting over her heart. Naruto grimaced and dropped his transformation, earning a panicked scream from the nurse. Not so much. I'd suggest you use the exit back there. You don't want to stick around, he told her pointedly. She nodded mutely and scrambled towards the hidden door at the back of the room. Haku sat up in his bed with a wince. I take it the plan is in motion? Yep, now, let me see your shoulder. Naruto held up the sealing suppression seal. Haku grimaced as he pulled down the shoulder of his kimono top. Naruto placed the tag as gently as he could. Once it was in place, he held up a half-ram seal. The seal glowed blue briefly, indicating its activation. He helped Haku out of bed. The boy moved a bit stiffly but was able to stand up and walk on his own. Let's get a move on, Sasuke muttered impatiently. As soon as Haku was ready, the Uchiha led the way to the door, a kunai clenched in his offhand and Sharingan blazing. He paused at the door before throwing it open. The atrium was a mess. Bodies of prisoners and guards alike were strewn about. Blood flowed across the concrete in tiny streams and improvised weapons were scattered about. The fight still raged, with reinforcements arriving to try and hold the line against the prisoners as they made for the stairway. With Sasuke leading the way, they skirted the walls as they tried to avoid the fighting. Naruto tried not to slip on the blood that slicked the ground. As they crossed the hall leading to the recreational rooms, a guard appeared from nowhere. Naruto's hand lashed out and cut his throat with a created sword. Haku gave him an odd look. Where did that come from? Sasuke shook his head before he could answer. Talk about it later. Let's move. Instead of going directly for the door to the antechamber, he made his way along a long, skinny hallway. They continued to creep along the back wall. The entire time, Naruto barely breathed. He was convinced any moment someone would notice them and they'd be dragged into the fighting. When they finally reached the door to the fighter waiting room, Naruto let out a sigh of relief. The room lay quiet and still. You couldn't even hear the fighting that raged in the atrium anymore. We're almost there, Sasuke muttered. A confident grin stretched across Uchiha's lips. Naruto walked over to the lever next to the gate. Took some effort, but finally the lever flipped. The silence was pierced by the sound of gears grinding and rattling chains as the metal gate rose up. Once it was clear, Naruto led the way into the entrance tunnel. There was an air of excitement between them. They could sense they were close to escape. Once we get upstairs, keep your awareness up. There'll be fighting up there too, Naruto said over his shoulder as they exited the tunnel. The arena looked different from when it was in use. The bright stadium lighting was off, replaced with just enough lighting to cast a dim glow across the cavernous room. Naruto made a beeline for the side of the arena. They'd have to use surface climbing to get into the stands. Haku eyed the wall wearily. I think I'll need some help getting up, he admitted sheepishly. Naruto nodded readily. Usually, a shinobi would stay horizontal using core strength supplemented by chakra. With that wound, it would be difficult for Haku. He sidled up next to the Mist Genin and let Haku lean on him. With his arm over Naruto's shoulder, they began a faltering walk up the side of the wall. Sasuke strode smoothly beside them. At the top, they came over the lip of the barricade and Haku was able to stand on his own. As he swept his gaze upward, Naruto thought he saw movement in one of the boxes. He paused and looked closer. It was hard to make anything out in the dim light. Kurama growled a warning. Naruto, I sense strong negative emotions. There are people here. Naruto's pulse quickened. He instantly knelt to the ground and placed his finger down. As the pulse of chakra rippled across the arena. 5 pings. 1 minuscule, 2 large, 2 massive. His eyes snapped to the box he'd been looking at just as a bright light snapped on. As the box was illuminated, his spirits sank. Naruto saw the unpleasantly familiar visage of their captor, flanked by all 4 of his enforcers. Takaru glared down at them. His glasses glinted dangerously as he adjusted them. When I heard of the escape attempt, I thought someone might try this route. I must admit I'm disappointed to see you here so soon after I warned you about playing along. The nobleman gripped the banister so tightly his knuckles bled white. Once this little riot is put down, I'll make especially sure the lesson sinks in. While the noble spoke, Itojiro took off his mask. The shaggy-haired man bore a bloodthirsty grin. He licked his lips as he shuffled around behind Takaru protectively. Naruto eyed the 4 mist shinobi wearily. Damn it. The twins were hard enough, and Itojiro is supposed to be on par with Kakashi. Don't even know what that Ruji guy can do. And Haku is injured. He couldn't think of a way they could beat them. Escape wasn't much of an option either. Takaru licked his lips. He looked like a snake, about to eat a juicy rat. Itojiro, I want you to end this riot so I can deal with these disobedient toys, he ordered with a nasty smirk. Itojiro nodded. He drew his needle sword with a sharp ring. Very well, Lord Takaru. I'll take care of the riot. The noble's grin widened. Then Itojiro's blade erupted through his chest, right where his heart was. Takaru's eyes widened as he stared at the blade protruding through his body. What? Blood sprayed from the wound as Itojiro ripped his blade free of Takaru's body. The noble collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut. He tumbled over the railing into the stands. Naruto was frozen in shock. Idly, he noted a tingle on his skin as the punishment seal disappeared. What was going on? He'd expected Takaru to die today, but not at the hands of his own men. Itojiro chuckled while he stood in Takaru's place. His eyes danced with mad glee as he looked at the dead noble. Naruto gathered his wits enough to speak up. Not that I mind, but wasn't he paying you? Itojiro's gaze landed on him. Ah, the little leaf ninja. Thanks for causing this opportunity. The mad giant leapt over the barrier and landed in the stands. He treaded carelessly on Takaru's head. See, rich boy here forgot who he was employing. What kind of fool makes a mercenary his main guard? Next to Naruto, Sasuke shifted wearily. So what now? Now I'm going to do exactly what I said. I'm going to put down this little insurrection. Then Takaru is going to continue as usual. Naruto gave him a quizzical look, which got a chuckle from Itojiro. Come on, you're not that stupid. We're shinobi after all. The gears began to turn. Takaru will continue as usual, so he doesn't want a stop to the fights. The only way such a thing was possible was if someone took Takaru's place. It wouldn't be hard. The man was an eccentric recluse. You want to use transformation to replace him? Bingo! Itojiro laughed merrily. I'm growing tired of taking orders, so I'll take Takaru's place. It'll make sense for him to experience some changes after such a traumatic event as this. Then, eventually, in a few years, maybe his family will begin to have some accidents. Naruto's eyes widened. You're planning on taking over the country? Sasuke gaped in surprise next to him. You guessed it. And you want to know the hilarious part? I couldn't have done it without that little escape plan of yours. It was pretty fun, watching you piece things together." Naruto felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. His surprise showed on his face, and Itojiro took great amusement in it. "You knew," the mist shinobi nodded with a cackle. "You bet your ass I did. And you thought you were being so sneaky using those little clones of yours. The only reason it worked is I wanted it to. So thanks for the assist." Itojiro twirled his blade and licked his lips. As he prepared to strike, a series of muffled explosions rang out from the ground above. Chapter 15. Assault on the Mansion. The forest was creepy, silent, yet every little sound seemed to carry through the thick fog. Sakura was constantly on edge, knowing they were close to where her teammates were being held. She waited for Anko and Turtle to return with impatience. They'd been gone for over a half hour. Finally, Wolf's partner perked up, raising his snout to the air and sniffing. Anko, Wolf, and Turtle slunk into the clearing like ghosts. The purple-haired woman wore a perturbed look, one that made Sakura's stomach churn with anxiety. "We've got a problem." Anko forwent any preamble. She was deadly serious. Kakashi looked at her sharply in a silent order to continue. "It's the place we're looking for, but the guards bear the crest of the Minamoto family." Kakashi pinched the bridge of his nose, while Wolf let out a curse. Sakura looked at the older ninjas and Kunoichi. There was a tension in their demeanors now. "What's the Minamoto family?" "They're the family of the daimyo of the Land of Fog," Kakashi explained distractedly. He kept his attention on Anko. "Is it the daimyo's mansion?" Anko shook her head and said, "No, it's just the regular crest." Some of the tension bled away from Kakashi. "Well, that's some good news, but it still poses a problem. We have to weigh our options. It's a bit risky if the person behind this is a member of the family." Wolf nodded. "Agreed, if we're not careful, this could be a political disaster for the village. We can't just attack and rescue them without thinking it through." The other adults agreed and began to discuss the need for caution. Sakura was growing concerned. Would they decide that they needed to retreat? A lump formed in her throat. "We aren't just giving up, right?" Anko scoffed and dismissed her concerns. "As if we just gotta run through the logistics more." With her concerns set at ease, Sakura stood back, while her senior shinobi discussed the ins and outs of performing the extraction without implicating the village. The overall consensus seemed to be that they'd alter their physical appearances, not just transform, and any trace of their connection to the leaf needed to be concealed. That meant no umbu armor, no headbands, and even Wolf's partner wasn't allowed to go in. Then Bird motioned to Sakura. "The girl should stay with Haramaru. It will be dangerous." "What? But I want to help rescue Sasuke and Naruto," she protested. She looked to Kakashi for support, but he seemed to be considering it. "He is right, Sakura. This is going to be dangerous. From this moment onwards, this is an unsanctioned mission. There won't be backup, and the village will disavow us if we get caught." Sakura swallowed heavily but nodded all the same. She wasn't about to back out now. Her sensei regarded her carefully but seemed satisfied with what he saw. "Very well, let's get to work. Remember, nondescript clothing, and no traces of where we're from." Anko helped Sakura. At Kakashi's direction, the oddball Jonin led Sakura away from the men into the forest, where everything was cast in emerald light and a bubbling stream drifted by slowly. Here they could get ready in peace. Anko placed a hand on her hip and brandished a kunai. "All right, first things first. I've only got a small bottle of brown dye that won't be enough for you, so the long hair's gotta go." Sakura balked at the suggestion. She'd spent years growing her hair, carefully maintaining it until it was long, thick as could be, and soft as silk. Her hand came up, unconsciously running through the long pink locks. If she didn't do this, she couldn't participate. Was her resolve really so weak? "No, I won't be a burden anymore." It was agony, but Sakura stilled her resolve and nodded to Anko. "Okay." Anko smirked, as though Sakura had passed some hidden test. The quirky woman walked around Sakura and took her hair in a surprisingly gentle grip. "Don't worry, I'm pretty handy with a kunai." The lascivious chuckle the older Kunoichi gave made Sakura think there was a double meaning there. But, true to her word, Anko was good with the knife. With quick, precise slices, Long threads of silky pink hair fell to the ground. The impromptu haircut didn't take longer than 10 minutes, and the fallen clumps of hair were deftly picked up and sealed away by Anko. Sakura regarded her new haircut in the reflection of the stream. It looked surprisingly cute, a medium-length bob she could still tie up. After dunking her head in the icy stream to remove any stray locks, she was ready for the next step. All right, take off the dress. The dye will ruin it. She shyly followed Anko's orders and removed her red dress. She'd be wearing other clothes, anyways, though thankfully she was wearing a sports bra underneath and her shorts underneath. With Anko's help, Sakura's hair was quickly dyed a rich brown, with any of the excess wiped away and left to disappear into the slowly drifting stream in fading brown swirls amidst the blue-green water. Unlike Sakura, Anko had no shame in discarding her trench coat and skirt to reveal her mesh bodysuit and the decidedly not conservative underwear under her skirt, leaning over the stream as she used a bottle of black dye to obscure her violet locks. While the jonin was busy with her hair, Sakura carefully changed into a long-sleeved black tank top and matching miniskirt, with her hair tied up in a short ponytail. Anko nodded in approval as she approached, wearing a surprisingly modest black compression shirt and dark leggings, her hair left unbound and falling to her shoulders like an onyx waterfall. Well, let's get back to the others. Sakura nodded and they made the short walk back to where the men had remained. They had already changed, with the Umbu and Kakashi donning long-sleeved black shirts and matching pants. They hadn't made too many changes to their hair or looks, save for a bit of makeup on the Inuzuka to hide his tattoos. The most drastic change was Kakashi, who had dyed his hair brown and slicked it back. His headband was replaced with a torn cloth, and for once he was without a mask. Sakura felt her cheeks flush at the sight of his handsome, chiseled face. It was much more delicate than she expected. The formerly silver-haired jonin looked to Wolf. Let's get to business. If you could draw out what you saw with the area scanning jutsu. Wolf nodded and, after he unsealed a piece of paper and pencil, began to draw a render of a multi-level floor map. The Umbu was no artist, but the map was clear enough. There were 3 levels. 2 were nearly identical, a central building with 4 wings branching off and jutting out. The third was the most interesting, a large rectangle with 2 sections portioned into smaller rectangles, and a few other rooms, all surrounding a round space. This is the prison level from what I can tell. There are a lot of people down there. It's partially under the east side of the mansion. Wolf pointed to the 3rd level. Kakashi studied the map carefully. He pointed to where Wolf had marked a staircase between the prison and one of the wings of the mansion. This seems like the best entry point. We'll split into teams of 3. One will focus on holding the attention of any guards, the other will move in to extract Naruto and Sasuke. Is that understood? Kakashi met all of their eyes, lingering on her the longest. Once everyone had acknowledged his words, he continued. Good. Turtle, Wolf, Bird, you 3 will be the team handling the guards. Anko, Sakura, and I will be the extraction team. Move out. With their orders given, they crept towards the mansion stealthily. Sakura was self-conscious about where she placed her feet, copying the lithe movements of Anko as best she could. She didn't want to mess this up. The entire experience was slightly surreal for her. Felt like everything was moving too fast. She could hardly breathe, let alone process the fact they were about to invade an enemy base. They snuck through the forest until they came upon a well-maintained road. Down a smaller road, lined with wisteria, they could see the bright red mansion sticking out in the white haze. Kakashi glanced at Wolf. Good luck. Together, the 3 Umbu shot off. They were nothing but dark blurs, darting between trees as they closed on the mansion. Kakashi waited several moments. All right, let's get going as well. Sakura followed after the older shinobi and kunoichi. They wound towards the mansion the opposite way the Umbu had. Sakura listened carefully. She was convinced any second now a guard would stumble upon them. Boom! A loud explosion crashed through the air. Sakura stifled a scream, as birds rose into the air with startled cries. Kakashi and Anko didn't spare a glance at the explosion. Instead, they pressed forward. The attack's begun. This is our chance. Kakashi ordered. They stole across the ground like shadows. Whenever a part of the garden was in their path, Kakashi cut through it with a lightning-shrouded kunai. Time was of the essence here. They could afford to leave traces. The distraction had worked well. They'd almost reached the mansion with no sign of guards. Sakura's pulse quickened. As they rounded the corner to the southeast wing, one appeared out of nowhere. He was a portly man, sprinting towards the attack from the Umbu. The man barely had a chance to widen his eyes. Anko struck, fast as a viper. She sliced the man's throat. His crimson blood sprayed across the ground. The man was left to bleed out. Sakura could still hear his dying gurgles as they raced towards the mansion even faster. A window-lined hallway was directly in their path. Kakashi pried open the window, breaking the lock. It eased open on well-oiled hinges, allowing them to slip into the mansion. Sakura hauled herself over the window ledge. She silently marveled at the ornate decorations lining the hall. Her sensei paid them no mind, instead glancing at Wolf's map. He gestured to a finely carved pair of double doors with golden handles. The stairs down are a room away. We'll cut through this big one to get to the hallway. Sakura spared the opulent decorations a glance. There wasn't much time to admire them. She followed as Kakashi led them forward, into a magnificent hall, with a soaring vaulted ceiling and wide-open marble floor. She imagined it would be used for balls and other social functions. Suddenly, Kakashi froze halfway across the floor. He stared at the double doors opposite them, already spread open. I suppose it was too much to ask we'd get through without any problems. She stared at her sensei. Had he gone mad? But it wasn't just him. Anko tensed, holding her kunai up defensively. Just as she made to ask what was wrong, a bone-chilling laugh echoed across the hall, along with a slow, mocking clap. A lanky giant stepped out from the doorway, flanked by a stocky man of average height. Well, if it isn't Kakashi. So much for disguising ourselves. So this was Itojiro? He wasn't what Sakura had expected. She'd imagined a grizzled warrior, muscular and imposing. Instead, she was met with a tall spider of a man. His lips covered in bloody face paint to form a mad smile. It reminded her a bit of an antagonist she'd seen in a horror film she'd watched with her parents. His partner was no less intimidating, with spiky black hair held up by a pair of worn black-lensed goggles, and a nasty burn scar on his right arm. There was a mean look to his face. Kakashi lifted the eye patch off of his Sharingan. Sakura couldn't help but be worried. For her sensei to use it so readily, he was worried about this fight. More importantly, their cover had already been blown. Without turning, Anko began to give her orders. Sakura, retreat to a safe distance. Only long-distance support. She kept her eyes locked on the stocky man, who fingered the hilt of his odd sword excitedly. Sakura hesitantly obeyed. She backed up quickly and took shelter in the hall. As if by some unspoken signal, the Jonin sprang to action. Itojiro threw his needle sword at Kakashi like a lance. But it was a bluff. As Kakashi dodged, the face-painted man lifted an arm over his head while holding the other in front his chest. Both hands formed half-ram seals. A cloud of mist billowed outwards. It engulfed the room in a white haze that was impossible to see through. She strained to see amidst the thickening fog, but it was pointless. Within the white abyss, the sound of metal clashing rang forth, along with an odd tinkling sound, like a spoon falling on the ground. Boom! Sakura jumped as a harsh explosion crashed through the haze, followed by an orange flash of fire that ate away at the mist. Seconds later, another, much brighter flash went off. It was a tremendous ball of fire that devoured the mist greedily. Once it was done, only a thin film hung in the air. She blinked in surprise. In only a matter of seconds, the ballroom had been transformed. Part of the floor had been scorched and blown apart. Elsewhere, a web of wires stretched diagonally from wall to wall, floor to ceiling all around. Itojiro blade had seemingly pierced the ceiling and floor as if they were cloth, creating a deadly net. The masked man himself balanced on one of the wires gracefully. He glared down at Anko, who exhaled wisps of smoke. "Tisage fine, ruin my fun." Without speaking, Itojiro and his partner moved swiftly. Itojiro tossed his sword toward Anko. As it passed by, Ryuji dragged his sword across the wire, A layer of seals got deposited on the wire. They smoked and burned as they drew close to Anko. She dodged out of the way, but the tags exploded. The ballroom floor was blasted apart. Shards of marble flew through the air. Sakura watched helplessly as one of the shards buried itself into Anko's left thigh. Her gut twisted as Anko landed awkwardly and her leg collapsed underneath her. Ryuji rushed to take advantage, his sword raised and ready to blast her apart. She had to act. Sakura quickly formed hand seals. Her hasty genjutsu ensnared him in an illusion of being tied to a stake while starving. The mist shinobi stopped and shook his head as he stared blankly at the spot where Anko crouched. After a few seconds his gaze sharpened and his sword swung down, but it had been just enough time. Anko leapt clear of the blast. Unfortunately, her actions drew Itojiro's attention. "I'd nearly forgotten about you. Perhaps I should kill you and send you to join the other baby leaf ninja." He wore a sadistic smile as he spoke. "You're lying, they're alive." Her denial only seemed to amuse him all the more. Though his attention was soon taken by Kakashi trying to strike him down with a lightning blade. Itojiro leapt from his perch to avoid the residual electricity. Midair, he jerked his hand and recalled his blade. The mist shinobi landed lightly. His arm lanced forward. His sword soared through the air, straight for Kakashi's chest. Her sensei dodged to the side. Itojiro's gave a savage grin. "You weren't the target, copy ninja." Kakashi stiffened as Itojiro twitched his fingers. The path of the blade changed. Suddenly it was headed for her. Her sensei tried to move, but it was moving too fast. Sakura flinched as the silver streak approached. She felt the cold bite of icy metal wrapping her from head to toe. Sakura opened her eyes and looked at the metallic thread that wrapped around her from shoulder to knee, inch gaps leaving her body visible, but also exponentially more dangerous. One move and she would be shredded to pieces. Itojiro wore a sickening grin as he clutched Nuabari in his hands once more. He eyed Kakashi and Anko nastily. "Stay where you are, or I'll turn your little genin into steaks for the dogs," he threatened. Kakashi stood frozen, his eyes darting between her and Itojiro, judging whether he could make it in time. Anko, meanwhile, let out a howl of pain as she found herself blasted back by the black-haired man amidst the distraction. Was this it? Was she going to die? Sakura felt an odd heat fill her, as she felt the wire dig into her arm and unleash a trickle of blood. Tears flooded her eyes. This was the exact situation Kakashi had warned them of, and she was the one captured. What am I thinking? Of course I was. In the end, she was weak. Sakura had the drive to be better, but what good was that when you were so weak? All she had been was a liability, and it sickened her that her sensei and Anko might die because of her. Boom! The entire room shook as a terrible explosion of wind tore through the far side of the room. Dust and smoke billowed out. Sakura was blown backwards and landed hard on her side. Thankfully, Itojiro had let the wire go slack in his surprise, so she wasn't cut to ribbons. A heavy, evil feeling washed over her. It was oppressive and choking. Sakura saw Kakashi and Anko staring into the slowly clearing smoke. A gaping hole had been blown in the floor of the connected hall, taking a portion of the wall with it. The two jonin shared a glance. "Is that what I think it is?" Anko asked wearily as she struggled to her feet. Kakashi nodded sharply. "The Nine-Tails chakra. So much for being dead." Chapter 16. Reunion, the end of the battle. Explosions rumbled in the distance like rolling thunder, muffled by meters of dirt and stone. Dust fell from the ceiling like rain. The room shook ominously under their force. Naruto held his arms out, steadying himself so he didn't tumble back over the wall. He had to steady Haku as well. Above them, Itojiro cursed, his head whipping back around towards the instance. A hand flew to his ear. "What are you idiots doing up there?" he hissed. Was he talking to someone on a radio? The towering blonde man glanced back at them, before furiously muttering back into the radio. Whatever he heard back made the man furious. Naruto got a sneaking suspicion. Curious to test it, he extended his senses. Even through all the dirt and concrete, he could feel 3 familiar chakra signatures. What's Anko doing here? He shook it off and turned to Sasuke with a grin. We got lucky. Kakashi and Sakura finally tracked us down. They've got backup too. He said nothing, but Sasuke's face said it all. A look of relief and satisfaction. Ichiro, Nejiro, you deal with the brats. Ruji and I need to go help out the idiots upstairs. Itojiro ordered the twins. The black-haired twin nodded in acceptance. With one last lingering glance towards them, Itojiro turned in a huff and stalked back towards the elevator. The stocky man with the nasty scar followed behind him like a loyal dog. Naruto stared at the backs of the two mist shinobi as they retreated. Another explosion shook yet more dust loose from the ceiling. Focus on the task at hand. Kurama chided. He nodded and turned his attention back to the twins. In the seconds since he'd been distracted, they hadn't bothered to attack. His gaze fell warily to the sword tucked in each of their sashes. Kiba, the black-haired twin, Ichiro, shifted. He fingered the hilt of his wakizashi. A tenseness permeated the air between them. Naruto glanced at Haku. Why don't you get a head start on getting out of here? He suggested tersely. He remembered how the twins had picked them apart. They wouldn't hesitate to take advantage of Haku's injury. Are you sure? Haku looked at the twins wearily. I could help. Naruto nodded assuredly. We'll be fine, there's a plan this time. Haku looked uncertain, but ultimately nodded sharply. Very well, I'll go. Naruto created a clone to guard their injured friend. He kept an eye on the twins in case they tried to make a move. Ichiro simply smirked arrogantly as Haku, and the clone disappeared up the stands. The twins began to pace in opposite directions, slowly flanking them from higher ground. Naruto spoke to Sasuke under his breath. You remember the plan? Sasuke nodded his agreement. With a deep, steadying breath, Naruto drew his katana. The twins' abilities had taken him by surprise before. Now he'd had time to consider them and dissect their skills. Thus, he and Sasuke had already planned a counter. At least he hoped so. He struck with speed and power, darting for Nejiro to his left. Even as he moved, a clone popped into existence and shot for Ichiro. A pale haze shrouded his sword as he brought it down towards Nejiro with a single hand. His eyes narrowed. He knew what came next. Nejiro's Nodachi was replaced with Ichiro's wakizashi. Naruto unleashed the wind, patiently waiting at his sword's edge, blasting Nejiro back. In the same instant, he felt his clone pop. Even as he moved in, a wakizashi-sized blade protruded from his offhand. He met Ichiro's blade with a shower of sparks, his right hand raised to deliver a terrible blow on the surprised boy. Ichiro disengaged with a curse. What the hell? Where did that sword come from? He declined to answer, instead wreathing his blades in wind chakra and unleashing a torrent of blunt wind upon the smaller twin. The back of his neck tingled. It was his only notice to move before a roaring wave of water crashed down. Naruto flipped backwards, tucking his body into a roll as he reached the arena floor. Quick as a flash, he was back on his feet and spinning to meet a challenge. Nejiro careened towards him through the air, Nodachi raised for an attack. But Naruto wasn't fooled. He was prepared when Ichiro swapped in, his half of the kiba drawn and sparking with lightning. Before the boy had a chance to strike, a brace of kunai sliced the air and made Ichiro dodge hastily. He skidded to a stop of the ground and glared at something over Naruto's shoulder. Naruto glanced backwards. Sasuke had perched himself on top of the wall, Sharingan blazing as he studied the fight. So far, everything is going to plan. Sasuke would stay back and interrupt their teamwork, while Naruto would engage directly. Back and forth they went. Naruto battled the twins the best he could, while Sasuke kept them from switching too often. The longer it went, the more confident Naruto became. He was beginning to recognize their patterns, what kind of attacks caused them to switch a particular weapon in. The only time they switched in with a kiba was for a finishing blow. Anytime he pressed, Nejiro went on defense for Ichiro, who seemed to prefer well-measured sneak attacks. Finally, the twins grew frustrated. After a particularly fierce volley of attacks, they broke their pattern. Ichiro yanked the kiba blade from his sash and ordered his brother to do the same. "We're gonna fry you, little shit." An aurora of blue lightning surrounded the twins, engulfing them in chirping shrouds. They moved faster, more than the eye could hope to follow. With the crack of thunder, both twins unleashed a blast of lightning at Naruto. In response, he stabbed his blades into the ground and flashed through 3 hand signs, ending on the bird sign. Wind style, wind dome. An opaque dome of solid air surrounded Naruto. It whirled around him and absorbed the blasts of lightning. With their enemies finally fixated on Naruto, it was time for Sasuke to finally take advantage. The heat in the arena spiked, as Sasuke let loose a gout of flames that threatened to engulf the twins. They were forced to retreat, cursing as their clothes smoldered. Before they could collect themselves, Naruto dashed forward. He prepared his swords, taking careful aim with 2 arching wind blades. His enemies avoided it, throwing themselves to the ground. The blades bit deep into the wall, raining rubble down. As the twins clambered to their feet, Sasuke used a replacement to appear behind Ichiro. Without preamble, he buried his kunai deep into the black-haired twin's neck. Nejiro stared with wide, horrified eyes as his brother collapsed. Horror gave way to rage. The hair stood up on the back of Naruto's neck. He witnessed Nejiro's Kiba blade sparking ominously. Naruto tried desperately to stop it, slashing his sword to unleash a slicing wind blade. But wind was far slower than lightning. The screaming bolt of lightning blasted into Sasuke's chest, throwing him back into the wall where his body impacted with a dull thud before slumping to the ground. Naruto's heart stuttered, afraid Sasuke wouldn't get up. He breathed a sigh of relief when he saw Sasuke stir, slowly getting up, though he had to quickly return his attention to Nejiro, who had crouched at his brother's side. "Big brother, no." Angry tears poured down his cheeks. Naruto frowned. He'd react even worse if that were Konohamaru. For one brief moment, he allowed himself to feel sympathy for his opponent. But he had to remind himself that the boy was a killer. He helped with the bloodline cleanses that had seen thousands butchered, including children Konohamaru's age. That hardened his resolve. He stood ready as Nejiro gripped the second Kiba blade. A much larger shroud of lightning hissed around him, and he glared at Naruto hotly. "I'm going to kill you, leaf scum." Not eager to give the man an opening, Naruto slashed his sword, unleashing a howling wind storm that slashed the ground. In the blink of an eye, Nejiro dodged. He moved faster than he had the entire fight. Naruto sensed his movement, but he could scarcely comprehend it. He spun around, just in time to see Nejiro unleash a humming beam of lightning that moved faster than he could hope to react. His lungs ceased to function, breath caught in his throat. Naruto instinctively flinched as the beam struck him. He expected intense heat and the painful pinprick of electricity. But it never came. All he felt was a slight tingle across his skin. "What's going on?" Naruto opened his eyes in surprise. The lightning still danced around him. Yet he didn't feel it. In the first fight, he'd brushed it off and thought it was his mind playing tricks. Now there could be no doubt the Kiba didn't affect him. Naruto shook his head. He could ponder the strange phenomenon later. With his opponent distracted and angry, he had to strike. "Kurama, give me a one-tailed cloak." "Very well." Bubbling red chakra surrounded him, forming the rough shape of a fox with a swaying tail. Naruto channeled wind into his katana. He loaded his swing, gripping it with both hands. With a powerful two-handed slash, he unleashed a swirling disc of slicing wind that raced towards his enemy. As it struck Nejiro, the disc erupted into a towering tornado of slashing wind. It howled like a wounded animal, shooting Nejiro straight towards the ceiling. "Sasuke, fire!" Sasuke snapped out of his stupor from the blast and managed to launch a fireball into the tornado. The flames erupted into a blazing tornado. The heat cracked and darkened the concrete stands, and the air filled with the smell of acrid black smoke. The tornado of fire erupted, blasting a hole into the upper edge of the arena. Dust and rubble fell from the ceiling like hail. Sharps of stone and dirt threatened to slice you. Naruto stared up into the open void. He let his chakra senses pulse outwards to feel for Nejiro's chakra. All he felt was Kakashi, Sakura, and Anko, and they were fighting Itojiro. He let Kurama's chakra slip away and turned to Sasuke. "Our team is up there fighting Itojiro, we gotta get up there." He made to head for the hole that was blasted in the ceiling. but Sasuke didn't move. Naruto, what was that chakra you just used? What do you mean? You know what I mean. The feeling of that chakra. I don't know why, but it scares me. Like it's familiar or something. Naruto could have cursed, but he stifled the urge. Now wasn't the time for this, they had to get moving. But the stubborn set to Sasuke's jaw and shaken look in his eyes said it all. Sasuke was a baby at the time. Perhaps he somehow remembered the feel of Kurama's chakra from that night? Either way, he wouldn't budge without an answer. There wasn't time for a proper answer, but hopefully a simple one would suffice. It's an alternate source I have. I'll explain it later. For now, our team needs us. Sasuke stared at him before nodding. Finally, they could be on their way. Naruto dashed back up the retaining wall and into the stands. He moved swiftly, dodging the bits of rubble on the ground and the occasional piece that still fell to the floor. When it came time to surface walk up the wall towards the hole, they had to be careful. Cracks riddled the surface, and every second there was a risk the section of wall might come away beneath their feet. At one point, Naruto felt the stone underfoot give way. He was just able to swing it up and cling to a sturdy section of wall. The piece of the wall crashed to the stairs below as Naruto's heart hammered in his chest. It was a relief when they were up and over the rim of the hole and into the hallway beyond. The ornate hallway was a ruin of soot and rubble. One wall had been blown apart. Naruto tried to ignore the bits of charred flesh and bones scattered about, all that was left of Nejiro. Before he could be noticed, Naruto crouched behind a pile of broken stone, carefully observing the room beyond. Sasuke came up behind him, peering over his shoulder. A tangled net of gleaming wire stretched from floor to ceiling and wall to wall. Anko and Kakashi stood amidst the net, roughed up but relatively fine, if a bit low on chakra. Then he spotted Sakura, and his breath stilled. She was snared by wires, wrapped up in a deadly cocoon set to shred her to pieces. I can't rush in. Naruto had to restrain himself from rushing to her rescue. Ryuji lay on the ground. He'd been hit by a piece of rubble. A large bloody chunk of stone lay near him, but Itojiro was nowhere in sight. No matter how hard he tried, Naruto couldn't get a bead on Itojiro's chakra. It was too hard, with it being spread throughout the room. Sasuke scanned the room with his Sharingan. I can't see the clown anywhere, the Uchiha muttered. It makes no sense. I know I sensed him up here a few moments ago. Naruto frowned. The gears in his mind turned slowly. It was almost as if Itojiro knew they were coming. He's a sensor too. Naruto cursed and extended his senses in a circle. He snapped into action as he felt a ping, spinning just in time to bat aside Itojiro's needle sword. The giant pressed forward with a cackle. His long leg lashed out like a whip, slamming into Naruto's stomach and launching him into Sasuke and through the crumbling wall. They tumbled into the ballroom amidst a barrage and rubble. The debris tore open skin and clothes indiscriminately. Stars danced behind Naruto's eyes. He heard a ringing and a distant shout from Kakashi. Before he could try to make sense of it, his hands were yanked into the air, and his legs to either side, forming a great big X in midair. Sasuke was strung up alongside him, his head lolled unconsciously, no doubt knocked out by the kick. Itojiro appeared in a wisp of fog, barefaced and bearing a mad grin. You're clever, I'll give you that, little leaf ninja. You managed to take down the twins. But now that you're bound by Nuabari, there's no escape. Your chakra is locked away. He heard Kakashi curse under his breath. Though his stomach lurched with fear, Naruto felt something was off. With an experimental pulse, he quickly realized Itojiro was mistaken. It's just like the Kiba, this effect doesn't work on me. Though infinitely curious about the reasons, there was no time for that. Instead, his mind turned to how he'd use this to his advantage. Right now, we're hostages. The second I get out, I need to free Sasuke. If I do this right, maybe the others can find an opening. But I have to free Sakura too. It seems that sensei of yours is thinking the same. Kurama growled. Indeed, the fox was right. Kakashi looked around subtly, keen eyes looking for an opening. Anko was the same, like a coiled snake just waiting to strike. All he had to do was give them the chance. It wasn't without risk. He'd seen Itojiro move. He was lightning quick and his sword even faster. But there was no escape without a distraction. Naruto's eyes darted about, dissecting the tangled web of wires and exactly which to cut to save Sakura and clear a path. 1, 2, 6. He'd have 3 seconds at most to free Sasuke and cut 6 wires. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. His heart rate slowed, and an odd calm settled over him, as he let the familiar chakra of his Tempest-style rage within, like a whirlwind on a razor's edge. Naruto's eyes snapped open, and he leapt into action. The wires holding him tight snapped with a metallic twang. Long blades jutted from his palms, severing the wires around his ankles. Quick as can be, Naruto sliced apart the wires holding Sasuke. 1 second, he whirled about, unleashing a pair of razor whips that slashed through the air and severed the target wires. Sakura fell to the ground, the cocoon of wires unspooling around her. 2 seconds. With 1 second remaining, Naruto spun on his heel and deflected an expected blow from Itojiro's sword. He unleashed a whirlwind that sent the sword to bury itself into the ceiling. Itojiro gaped in disbelief. "How the hell did you do that, Beer?" He cut off in a choked gasp as a lightning-shrouded fist suddenly erupted through his chest. The lightning snapped about, chirping like a mass of birds. The fist ripped itself out, leaving Itojiro to collapse to the ruined floor. Kakashi stood in his place, regarding the man with cold eyes. The giant lay on the floor gasping for air as blood poured from his mouth, staining his sharp teeth pink. How? Beats me, the Kiba were the same. The lightning has no effect for whatever reason. Naruto explained as he allowed his swords to fully emerge from his palms. He padded towards Itojiro warily. Even like this, the man might prove dangerous. Understanding flashed through Itojiro's eyes. "Those swords, you make them." A humorless chuckle bubbled from the man's lips. "I get it now. Must be a failsafe built into the swords. To think, I'd run into someone descended from Genryusai here of all places. Damn the infernal Tamashi no Ken." Naruto's breath hitched. "What do you mean? Do you know something about my bloodline?" Itojiro laughed, though it was weak and rattling. The man looked startlingly pale. "Ha! How pathetic. You've got no clue what you can do, boy. And I won't help. You might as well kill me." He stared at them defiantly. There was a fire in his eyes, one that wouldn't be put out. Naruto hesitated. He wanted to press for more answers, but there was no time. Itojiro was dying and wouldn't yield his secrets. "Kakashi, should we?" Naruto trailed off uncertainly, motioning vaguely towards Itojiro. "I got this." Kakashi removed a long, sharp kunai from his hip pouch. Without approaching Itojiro, he tossed the knife into his neck. The flesh parted easily around the neck, releasing an endless gush of blood that stained the floor crimson. On the floor, Sasuke climbed to his feet slowly, having woken up. The Uchiha rubbed his head tenderly, looking about with bleary eyes. Anko limped up alongside him, looking torn between wanting to punch him and wanting to give him a hug. Eventually, she finally decided on a pat on the back. "It's good to see a kid." For the first time in 3 weeks, Naruto allowed himself to relax. It was over. Chapter 17, The Disaster That Wasn't. Hidden Leaf Village, 997 AS. Shikako worried her lip. It had been 3 weeks since Naruto had left for his mission, and not a single hint of a word from him. Perhaps something had happened. She'd heard horror stories from her father about rookie teams being drawn into missions beyond their scope. It didn't help that Asuma was tight-lipped about it when she asked. She sighed and returned to practicing her shadow possession jutsu. Worrying did nothing for her. A slender shadow slithered across the ground and tried to snare a squirrel. She was broken from her concentration with the arrival of an Umbu, the woman who had long, distinctive purple hair and wore a cat mask. Sheathed over her shoulder was a katana. The woman seemed to be studying her. Ino and Choji glanced over, curious about the odd arrival. "Greetings. I have been asked to escort you to the hospital. Naruto Senju and his team have returned. They are currently resting." Shikako's stomach lurched. What had happened to cause him to end up in the hospital? Without a thought, she began to pack up her supplies. Before the Umbu had a chance to continue, She moved past him and began to dash towards the hospital. She raced through the streets, dodging around random passersby and rapidly closing on her destination. Beside her, she could sense Ino and Choji racing along. Before she knew it, she turned the corner onto the street where the hospital was located. The hospital stood 3 stories tall, with a broad face of white concrete dotted with windows that glinted in the sun. The sloped roof was painted sapphire blue with thick electrical pipes. Thick electrical pipes crawled across the shingles. Over a clear set of 4 glass doors, a sign hung with a green background and a red circle with the kanji for healing inside. Shikako dashed forwards. She shoved the glass door open and sprinted across the lobby to the reception desk. Her chest heaved for air as she leaned on the desk heavily. The receptionist, a young man with short brown hair a few years older than her, seemed startled. Miss, can I help you? What room is Naruto send you in? She asked between pants. Are you a relative? The man sounded uncertain. She frowned as her breathing began to settle. Maybe she could try to lie, but that would be a drag. Besides, most people knew Naruto didn't have any family except the Hokage and his own family. No, I'm his best friend. I just want to make sure he's okay. Please, tell me where he is. The receptionist frowned. Normally, I wouldn't make an exception, but I think this one time it's okay. He's in room 115. Besides, my records show that he's only being checked over. There aren't any serious injuries or illnesses. Shikako felt the pressure that had been on her chest ease away. She offered the receptionist a thankful smile and glanced around. According to the signs above the right-hand hallway, she could find room 115 that way. She began to walk in that direction at a much slower pace, Ino and Choji falling into step beside her. Well, at least he's okay. That's good to hear. I hope Sasuke is okay too, Ino said, no doubt hoping to cheer her up. Though she could do without Ino's obsession with Sasuke being brought into it. That boy would never give her the time of day. She wasn't sure why her friend bothered pining after him. Then again, I don't have much room to talk. At least the one I like is just a dense idiot. After several minutes checking room numbers, another few after turning the corner, they finally came across room 115. Shikako eagerly gripped the door handle and slid the door open. She was met with a sight that made her cheeks flood with heat. Though she also felt confusion. Naruto sat on one of 2 beds in the room, his shirt off. Muscles like carved granite rippled beneath peach skin. They'd gotten even bigger than since she'd last seen them. Thankfully, her friend had his pants on. What confused her was the occupant of the second bed. Sasuke sat on the bed, thankfully with his shirt on. She didn't need to hear Ino gushing over him. Normally, if Naruto and Sasuke were in the same room, they'd bicker like cats and dogs. But they were smiling, and Naruto was currently teasing Sasuke, with Sasuke smiling back. Since when could Sasuke smile? Ha! You should have seen how you jumped from that needle. How can you be so tough in battle? But a little needle scares you. Naruto laughed. Sasuke narrowed his eyes, but he was still smiling. Oh, shut up, idiot. His words lacked the usual heat. Man, you two need to work on your awareness. Didn't even notice we had an audience. Sounds like you need a refresher, brat. Shikako jumped and turned towards the corner where she noticed a scandalously clad kunoichi. Her purple hair was in its signature ponytail, though slightly messier than usual. She'd met Anko many times over the years, crossing her path when she was with Naruto. Naruto turned in surprise, finally noticing her. A wide smile broke out on his face. Shikako, you're here. Awesome. Well, I heard you were in the hospital, so I decided to stop by, she said nonchalantly. There was no need for him to know how much of a hurry she'd been in. She was distracted when Anko crossed the room and cuffed Sasuke lightly across the back of the head. Come on, Uchiha. Let's give the two some time to talk. Besides, the doctor already said you're free to go. Sasuke scowled at Anko lightly, but nonetheless bid Naruto goodbye and left with Anko. Shikako heard Ino excitedly greeting Sasuke before the door slid shut behind her. Shikako stood awkwardly for several moments, unsure how to proceed. She wanted to express how glad she was Naruto was safe, but that just wasn't in her nature. In the end, she stuffed her hands in her pockets and groaned. Geez, you got a funny definition of staying safe. What's this I hear about you getting captured? Couldn't you go one mission outside the village without getting in trouble? Naruto chuckled sheepishly. Well, there was a former swordsman of the mist involved. He captured Sasuke and I, and we went to this prison that pitted shinobi against each other. But hey, we managed to escape, so now harm no foul. Shikako sighed and slapped a palm to her face. Of course, she couldn't expect him to be apologetic. Well, I'll leave you to get settled in. Besides, I need to get home and wash off from training. She turned around and offered one last wave. See you around soon. With that, she slid open the door and departed. As she walked down the hall, she shook her head fondly. Leave it to Naruto to get thrown in prison and treat it like a minor hassle. She smiled fondly. To think she'd bothered worrying about him. Naruto shifted uncomfortably under the stern and visibly angry gaze of his grandfather. His teammates stood next to him. For once, even Sasuke seemed to look contrite, a first for him. Kakashi was the only one who managed to remain aloof, though having his mask back on certainly helped. The Hokage sat at his desk wearing the white and red robes of office. His four-pointed hat pulled down low to cast his face in shadow, though his eyes shone through. Hiruzen took a long, slow drag of his pipe, exhaling a cloud of acrid smoke. For once, Naruto didn't have the courage to complain or chastise him. He'd only seen him this angry a few times. Let me see if I understand your report right, Kakashi. Despite knowing the potential political ramifications of your actions, you decided to attack the mansion of a foreign noble, knowing it went directly against my orders. Sounds about right, but given who it was, I figured you wouldn't mind. Kakashi offered a nonchalant shrug along with his words. A vein pulsed on the Hokage's forehead, though his eyes were drawn to Naruto and softened just slightly, before hardening seconds later. He turned his angry gaze back to Kakashi. Naruto breathed a sigh of relief. I am not complaining about the results of your actions, merely that you didn't request permission. Still, at least you had the good sense to disguise yourself. The elderly Kage eyed Sakura's chin-length hair, still showing traces of the brown at the roots. Naruto's relief didn't last long. Grandpa snapped his gaze at him. And you, Naruto, don't think I forgot about your slip-up. While ultimately the blame falls on your sensei for lack of preparations, you are a censor. I've taught you to never take that skill for granted. You should be using it even in the midst of battle, perhaps especially so. He simply nodded in acceptance of the critique, his face flushing slightly. Hiruzen's eyes softened as he finally gave them a wry grin. That being said, all's well that ends well. The mission was a success. There is no hint our presence was detected, and you even managed to capture 3 of the 7 swords of the mist all in all. A successful mission despite the issues. After the fighting had ended, they'd gathered up the blades of the fallen mist shinobi, before making a hasty retreat with Haku. The group had gone straight for the border. They didn't take a break until well past midnight when they crossed into the land of fire. Only then had they taken time to treat their wounds and rest. Thankfully, afterwards it had been a much more restful trip. Sakura spoke up timidly, asking a question that was on Naruto's mind. If I may, Lord Hokage, what will become of the swords? Are we keeping them or returning them? An excellent question, Sakura. Your friend Haku? He paused and nodded at Naruto and Sasuke. Will be returning to his village in a few days with an escort. I intend to send a representative to open negotiations for their return. Hopefully, this will be an opportunity to formalize the unofficial alliance the Mist and Leaf have had since the Civil War. That's good to hear. Naruto smiled. He would have felt a bit bad if they had decided to keep the swords as interesting as they were. Now, if that is all, I have some important paperwork to finish, so unfortunately, I must say goodbye. I'll see you at dinner, Naruto. Naruto nodded happily. They departed the Hokage's office, sliding the wooden door shut behind them. As they walked down the spiral staircase, Naruto noticed a contemplative look on Sakura's face. At the bottom, he nudged her with an elbow. Ryo, for your thoughts? Sakura frowned as they pushed their way out into the courtyard, walking towards the awninged wall that surrounded the Hokage office. I was just thinking about my performance during the mission. My genjutsu shattered too easy. I need to really improve if that's going to be my main weapon. She explained her troubles. Naruto hummed thoughtfully. True. Suppose I could let you practice on my shadow clones. It'll let us both get some practice. Though you shouldn't neglect physical training. Genjutsu won't always work. I agree with Naruto, though if you like, I can ask a friend to give you some tips. She's one of the other Jonin sensei. I'm sure there's some help I can offer to one of her students in exchange. Kakashi supplied helpfully. Sakura gasped excitedly. Do you mean Kurinai sensei? When I was researching at the library, the kunoichi on guard there said she was the best in the village. The very same. Kakashi answered with an eye smile. After walking together for a bit and chatting, Team 7 went their separate ways for the time being. But not before Kakashi informed them that they'd have a few days off before they'd be doing anything, to decompress from the ordeal. Naruto felt the slightest bit annoyed. He was eager to get back to training. The experience in the prison made him feel something he hadn't in quite some time. Weak. He wasn't a fan. Still, the others, especially Sakura, might need that time. Oh well, nothing says I can't train on my own. He accepted the circumstances with a shrug and continued the trek back to the Hokage's residence. On the third day of their break, Naruto found himself at the village's main gates, alongside his teammates, as they bid goodbye to Haku. The effeminate boy was almost fully healed and looking in very good spirits, wearing a floral-patterned pink kimono top and hakama pants with wooden sandals. Only the bandages beneath his kimono hinted at his injuries. Surrounding the mist shinobi were several leaf jonin, all of whom seemed hardened and ready. There was another there that slightly surprised Naruto. Shikako's dad, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, like taking a nap. Shikaku Nara bore a striking resemblance to his daughter. Though she had her mother's face, her hair was a shade darker like Shikaku's, and bound in the same spiky ponytail. They also slouched the exact same way. That was where the similarities ended. Shikaku had a nasty scar across his face and wore a neatly trimmed goatee on his chin. His vest was darker than the average jonin, marking him as an elite jonin. Thank you for everything you've done for me, Naruto, Haku said sincerely, bowing his head slightly. Not only did you save me, but you've also helped my village retrieve 3 of our 5 lost swords. I can't ever repay you. Naruto blushed in embarrassment. He waved off Haku's profuse thanks. No big deal. I'd have been a real jackass if I left you there with all the help you gave us. Tell you what, just promise we're gonna stay friends. Sound like a deal? He offered his hand to Haku, who gladly took it. I agree with what the idiot said we owed you. Sasuke supplied with his typical cool manner. Sakura smiled and added her opinion. Me as well, I agree. I haven't known you for long, Haku, but I enjoyed talking with you about healing herbs and toxins on our way here. Haku beamed at them, tears shimmering in his eyes. Thank you, you 3. I believe we'll be friends for a long time. Besides, I'll be seeing you soon enough. Huh? You coming back for the peace talks or something? Naruto asked quizzically. The Miss Genin looked a little nonplussed. Do you not know about the upcoming Chunin exams? They're being held here after all. I think you should be aware of it by now. You're strong enough to compete. As one, the 3 Genin members of Team 7 turned to stare daggers at their sensei. Kakashi blinked nonchalantly. Something on my face? No, you idiot. Why didn't you tell us about the exams? Sakura shouted indignantly. Oh, that. Kakashi hummed thoughtfully. I was meaning to tell you after the mission. Hadn't quite gotten around to it. He shrugged nonchalantly. Naruto grit his teeth. Sometimes, that cool personality really drove him crazy. He shook his head. No way was he going to let his annoyance with Kakashi spoil Haku's goodbye. A loud throat clearing drew everyone's attention to the waiting jonin. Shikaku looked none too pleased at the delay. We need to get going, so finish up if you could, he told Haku. Haku nodded, bowing his head politely. My apologies. I'll give my final goodbyes at once. He then turned to them and offered a last smile. Goodbye, everyone. I'll see you in a month and a half. See you then. Naruto told him. Goodbye, said Sasuke. We'll see you soon. Sakura told him cheerfully. Bye. Kakashi was succinct and cool as usual. Together, they watched as the group of 8 shinobi turned and dashed into the distance. Only after they were completely out of sight did they turn away. Man, I can't wait to see Haku again. And the Chunin exams. I want to do a bunch of extra training. What do you say, Kakashi? Can we get some harder training? Naruto asked his sensei hopefully. He fully expected to be rebuffed as usual. To his surprise, Kakashi shrugged. I was planning to do that anyway. This last mission made it clear I've been too lax. From now on, you get your wish, Naruto Sasuke. Your training will be much, much harsher. Kakashi regarded them with a sinister gaze. Hope you don't regret it, he said ominously. Ha, as if. I love hard training. Naruto crowed joyfully. He stiffened, as he felt a familiar chakra appear behind him, and an even more familiar pair of breasts press into the back of his neck. He tilted his head back apprehensively and found himself staring into the amused brown eyes of his tutor, a manic smile on her face. Good to hear, brat, 'cause I plan to drop in a few days a week to make sure you don't get lazy. After seeing your sorry ass get captured, can't take any chances with my student getting killed and embarrassing me. Naruto gulped. He had to pull teeth to get hard training from Kakashi. Anko did hard training as the baseline. He shuddered to think what she considered difficult. One word summoned up his feelings. Damn. Chapter 18. The Secret of the Swords. An orange glare poured through his open window, drowned out by the bright electric light. Naruto sat at his desk, hunched over one of the Kiba blades as his desk lamp focused on it. He'd been examining it for hours, looking for any hint of what Itojiro's words had meant. There was some secret about the seven swords and his clan. Based on what that sadistic giant said, he suspected the Amakuni had created them. It would explain why they couldn't hurt him, at least not with chakra-based abilities. But that brought to mind several questions. How did they have such odd shapes, and how were they seemingly indestructible? Yes, there was a secret to these swords, and he was determined to find it. Thankfully, his grandfather had allowed him to examine the swords so long as none got damaged. He could only look at one at a time, and they had to be returned every evening. Naruto paused, lifting his head. Kakashi had made him work on keeping his sensing active. Thus, he expected it when his door swung open silently and his grandfather spoke. Any luck? Naruto sighed, turning to look at his grandfather. Hiruzen had gotten out of his usual robes, favoring a simple white kimono top and comfortable pants. Not yet. I know the seals are somewhere, but the guy who wrote them didn't want them found. Hiruzen nodded thoughtfully. Well, when you learn something, be sure to tell me. What Itojiro said has me curious. I've been poring over our records of the hidden Edi from Lady Mito. So far, no mention of this Genryusai. You'll be the first to know, Naruto promised. Then I will leave you to it. Hiruzen left, closing the door quietly behind him. Naruto frowned as he turned back to the Kiba blade. There had to be some way to reveal the seals. He tried looking for one small seal or mark, but there didn't seem to be any. Not on the hilt, nor on the guard, and definitely not on the blade. How do I figure you out? He asked the blade as he ran a finger along its length. Naruto hissed as he accidentally cut himself on one of the blade's odd angles. A gush of blood smeared across the blade. Naruto sucked the blood off his finger, clenching it tight against his shirt as he waited for the wound to heal. Steam hissed from his wound as Kurama worked to seal it shut. Naruto reached for a cloth to wipe the blood off, only to freeze as he saw an odd sight. His blood had trickled down the Kiba blade, eventually reaching the base. There, a glowing seal had lit up blue. In a few seconds, the seal absorbed all the blood, before giving off a pulse of light as other seals spread out across the blade in a complex web of tiny seals that were interconnected. The arrays were incredibly complex. They made the prisoner seal look like the work of a journeyman and not a master. Of course, blood is a common activator, dummy. It made sense, too. If he truly had a blood connection to this Genryusai fellow, his blood would activate the unlocking seal on the Kiba. Naruto's annoyance at himself quickly faded, as he took out a pair of spectacles from his desk and began to peruse the tiny seals, no larger than the head of pin. The glasses were a product of seals themselves, able to magnify based on how much chakra he fed them. Finally, he could try and unlock the secret of what made these blades so special. One of the first set of seals he dissected was a formula he suspected was behind his immunity to chakra-related abilities from the Kiba and Nuabari. After searching through the seals, he finally found ones that he thought were related to making a blade unbreakable. They had to do with stability and permanence. Naruto carefully copied the seals down, resolving to try them as soon as possible. He'd have to try the blood trick on the other blades to see if they were the same. Now, just have to figure out how to make the seals so tiny. Naruto muttered. To carve or draw seals onto a blade in such a tiny script seemed impossible. There must be another trick behind it. But that could wait for later. He knew his grandfather would want to learn of his discovery. Naruto applied another bit of blood to the seal to relock it, before hurrying to go tell Hiruzen the good news. His grandfather was in his study when Naruto found him. He listened with rapt attention as Naruto described his discovery and told him his theories. Fascinating. I've seldom heard of such complex seal work. The only thing I've seen comparable is the barrier Lady Mito left for us. One thing is bothering me, though, Naruto replied. Hiruzen rose a curious eyebrow. Oh, both Nuabari and the Kiba don't hurt me with their effect, which means this Genryusai guy must have made both, but that's not possible. Each person gets one ability for their blades. Come to think of it, how'd he make the shapes so different? Naruto asked with a frown. Indeed, a curious conundrum. Perhaps you can get more answers when the Mist delegation arrives with their genin teams competing. His grandfather suggested. Naruto silently agreed. Well, see ya in the morning. I'm heading to bed to get up early for training tomorrow, he said with a nod. After bidding his grandfather good night, Naruto returned to his room and cleaned up his desk. He sent a clone to return the swords before turning in for the night. As the silver light of the moon poured through his curtain, Naruto dreamt of unraveling the secrets of the complex seals. Training was something that was no longer a chore for Naruto. The past 2 months since they had been back, Kakashi had stuck to his word and trained them hard. All three of them had individual plans working on improving their skills. For him, that meant practicing his seals, advancing his control of wind, and improving his stamina so he could create more blades. Finally, Kakashi had him begin to explore using his secondary water affinity more. Today, he was working on strength training using the resistance of the water. Thankfully, it was a warm day, so the water helped soothe his aching muscles. As he completed another lap trudging through the river with a log and training weights, Naruto glanced to where Sakura was sitting reading a chemistry book. Currently, she was resting from her physical training, while also advancing her knowledge for one of her new favorite forms of attack, poison. He winced. Anko had been both a positive yet unnerving influence on Sakura. Ever since they'd gotten back, she spent as much time training with Anko and Kurenai as she did Kakashi. With Anko in particular, she was nearly inseparable. If we're not careful, we'll have another Anko on our hands, but even smarter. One is plenty. The smell of ozone and crackle of electricity drew his attention to the last member of the team. Sasuke stood in front of a tree, practicing his lightning jutsu on it. One of the first things Kakashi did was test their affinities. While he was working on his secondary affinity, Sasuke was working on his primary, which turned out to be lightning, not fire as the Uchiha had thought. On top of that, Kakashi had been drilling him to improve his Sharingan and learn at least one jutsu from every element. Yes, all in all, Naruto was happy with the new intensity training had. Better get back to training. Naruto threw himself back into physical training, knowing he could push until he broke. Kurama would repair it and he'd be stronger than ever. It was a cheat code he was increasingly abusing in his quest to master his bloodline. Hours later, when Team 7 had finished their training, Kakashi called the 3 genin together under the shade of a particularly large oak tree. As you probably know, the Chunin exams begin next week. Here are your forms. Kakashi handed a medium-sized sheet of paper to each of them. We'll be ramping down training for the next week so you're fresh for the exams. At this point, it's more about refinement than anything. Though he nodded, internally Naruto had slightly different plans. I might be ramping things down, but that doesn't mean my clones will. That new wind technique needs more work. Later, after parting ways with his team and returning home, Naruto was in the backyard training on his own. He stood in the middle of a well-trimmed lawn, one arm held out as he wore a look of intense concentration. Wind swirled around the limb in a constant tornado of airstreams. He winced as a cut suddenly opened on his forearm. The blood was sucked into the tornado, and the wound began to hiss and steam. Damn it! Still can't control them precisely enough. He cursed. Typically, I don't mind healing you, but constantly doing it for these little cuts does grow tedious, Naruto. Kurama growled. Sorry about that. I'll take a break. Naruto sighed and let the wind die down around his arm. He could continue working on his jutsu later. He used his shirt to wipe his brow of the sweat. Just then, he heard a shout from behind. Big bro! Naruto turned to see Konohamaru, a cheerful 11-year-old boy with short brown hair and matching eyes. Wearing a yellow shirt and gray shorts, a long blue scarf trailed to his ankles. Technically, they were adopted cousins, since Hiruzen had adopted Naruto as a grandson. But the young Sarutobi had always been more of a little brother than anything. He smiled and opened his arms for a hug. Konohamaru quickly pulled away and gave him a hopeful grin. Think you could help me with the clone jutsu? Putting a finger to his chin, Naruto hummed thoughtfully. I don't know. Doesn't seem wise to train my rival for Hokage to be better. He teased, putting on an air of faux reluctance. Konohamaru whined, Oh, come on, you're so awesome. Something like this won't make a difference. All right, you convinced me. I'll help. Naruto replied with an indulgent smile. So, first thing about the clone jutsu, your chakra control has to be precise. It doesn't take much to pull off. If you're struggling, try using a tiny bit of chakra and making as many clones as you can. Naruto slowly walked his little brother through the jutsu, demonstrating it for him for good measure. At first, Konohamaru could only produce sickly-looking clones. Naruto himself had that issue once upon a time, usually a result of overloading it. Eventually, the young Sarutobi finally made 8 perfect clones. Yeah, I did it. Thanks, big bro. Konohamaru exclaimed cheerfully, giving Naruto a big hug. He chuckled and ruffled the boy's hair, receiving a pout in return. No problem, lil bro. Now all you need to do is work on chakra control. Eventually you want to make just 2. I'll give you some tips. His eyes drifted to the porch, where he saw their grandfather watching with a small smile. Naruto had sensed his approach a bit ago. Hey grandpa! Konohamaru's eyes lit up when he saw Hiruzen. Gramps, what are you doing here? Don't you got paperwork to do? Oh, just taking a break watching you two train. You can't go wrong with advice from Naruto on chakra control. Given his large reserves, his perfect control is remarkable. Naruto flushed slightly under the praise. He couldn't help but let a silly grin slip onto his face. Hiruzen then turned his attention to Naruto. And you, Naruto, how is your training for the exams going? Are you excited for them? Training is going good. Can't wait for the exams, especially when that misdelegation arrives. He replied, having spent the past week studying the seals on the Kiba, Shibuki, and Nuabari, he'd concluded they'd indeed been made by the same person, at least the seals were. The script style was identical, and no 2 sealers had the same style. The members of his clan must have had a seal master that helped them complete the swords. It had left him with more questions than he knew what to do with, ones he hoped the mist could answer. Though in the meantime he had plenty to distract him. I'm so glad all the extra training is over, Shikako complained. Naruto chuckled as they passed under a covered wooden bridge. It spanned across one of the 2 rivers that crossed the village. He enjoyed the refreshing breeze wafting off the cool water. Didn't you ask for extra training? He asked with amusement. Shikako slumped her shoulders with a moody expression. I didn't think Asuma-sensei would take it that seriously. Apparently, he wanted to keep up with Kurenai-sensei and your sensei. Alls I wanted was to be more prepared. That mission of yours was a wake-up call. Naruto hid a smile. He knew Shikako wouldn't appreciate it if she thought he was laughing at her. Glad she finally found motivation to train harder. He'd figured out long ago, Shikako wasn't motivated by the same things he was. Training wasn't enjoyable for her, so she had to have a reason for it, and pushing her had the opposite effect. Thankfully, it seemed she found one. Naruto, Naruto looked up, his eyes brightening as he spotted Haku waving to him from down the street, alongside a sea of unfamiliar faces bearing the headband of the hidden mist. No doubt the missed delegation. There was a blue-haired boy and an auburn-haired girl near Haku's age. No doubt his team. Behind them a tall, intimidating man with bandages around his lower face and a giant sword on his back. Finally, there were 3 tall jonin wearing the mist flak jacket. They seemed to be surrounding a 7th person. His friend looked healthy, with a bright smile as he wore a short-sleeved navy kimono shirt with pinstriped arm warmers. "Oh, who is this, Haku? Please, introduce us." A woman stepped from behind the jonin, much to their protest, and regarded him with curious green eyes. She was a statuesque beauty with fair skin and long auburn hair that fell down her back in a herringbone pattern, with a bang falling over her right jade-green eye. She had a rich, sultry voice that set his stomach aflutter. Haku bowed his head deferentially. "Of course, Lady May. This is Naruto, one of the genin who helped me escape, and his friend Shikako." He then waved to the mist shinobi. "And this is Lady May Terumi, the 5th Mizukage, her guards, Ryo, Hai, and Taiki. Then there's Chojuro and Mai Terumi, my teammates. And last but not least, Zabuza Momochi, our sensei, one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist." Naruto nodded, paying particular attention to Zabuza and May. One of them must be who Haku mentioned. "Lady May, we should hurry and get out of the open." One of the jonin, a man with chin-length black hair and a scar on his neck, urged the Mizukage. "Relax. Nobody dare try anything with me around." Naruto replied with a dismissive wave. Teich jonin sneered at him. "Oh, do you think so highly of your skills, genin?" Naruto rolled his eyes. "No, you jackass, we have a barrier that'd warn us if anyone unauthorized entered. And nobody from the Leaf strong enough would be stupid enough to try it since I'm a well-known censor. Pretty stupid to attack 4 jonin and a Kage with a censor to warn them." A look of embarrassment overtook the jonin's face. He looked to reply, but any retaliation was prevented by the musical laughter of May. Naruto couldn't help but notice the way her breasts moved under the off-the-shoulders blue dress and mesh armor the voluptuous woman wore. "My, you're certainly bold, and already handsome too. If you were a bit older, I might try snatching you for myself. Maybe you should try, dear niece." Naruto blushed profusely, though it was nothing compared to the auburn-haired girl Mai. Her cheeks and ears burned crimson, a stark contrast to her wavy shoulder-length hair. He'd wondered if there was a family connection, given the hair and name. Naruto definitely saw the resemblance, both in their delicate heart-shaped faces and their statuesque voluptuous frames. "What was that nonsense, old hag?" Mai shouted at her aunt, dark green eyes glaring daggers at the older woman. May's face twitched. A vein pulsed in her forehead. She spoke with an unnerving calm. Now, no need to be so uncouth. You'll never attract a man like that, dear niece." The younger redhead laughed. They had been getting closer, and now she and May were face to face. "Like I'd take advice from a hag that's never gotten a man herself. You should go for that guy, after all, you are desperate. Don't think I won't melt you, brat. Ha! You must be going senile in your old age. We have the same bloodlines, bitch. I'm immune." As the aunt and niece descended into intense bickering, Naruto shared a bemused glance with Shikako. "I think they forgot us." "Yup," Shikako agreed bluntly. Haku bowed in embarrassment. "I apologize, they get like this sometimes." Chojuro seemed uncomfortable with the public scene, while Zabuza looked mostly annoyed, as if this was a common occurrence. "Mai, stop speaking to Lady May so disrespectfully. And Lady May, please cease this. We don't want to embarrass the village." As one, the 2 women turned to the jonin guards and said, "Shut up, or I'll melt you." "They really are a lot alike," Naruto muttered quietly. While the aunt and niece continued to bicker, Naruto turned his attention back to Haku. "So, ready for the exams?" "Definitely. I'm eager to see how much you've grown," Haku replied. Feeling a pair of eyes on him, Naruto found Zabuza eyeing him speculatively. "Haku, this would be the boy with the Amakuni bloodline?" "Indeed, Zabuza-sensei. This is Naruto Senju," Haku replied. "Interesting. I'll look forward to chatting with you. Now, gotta break up a cat fight," Zabuza replied, before going to intervene in the fighting of the Terumi women. "He's the one then." Naruto realized Zabuza was the one who Haku had been speaking of. It made sense. Itojiro seemed to know of whatever connection his clan had to the Seven Swords. Haku gave a wince of chagrin. Sorry, have to get going. Let's try and hang out before the exam. Soon after, they parted ways as the Mist delegation with the Terumi women calmed down and steadfastly ignoring each other. The foreign shinobi continued on their way to the Hokage's office. Naruto and Shikako, meanwhile, continued on with their walk. After an afternoon playing shogi and enjoying the meal Shikako's mother made, Naruto left their home with a smile on his face. Bye, Mrs. Nara. See ya, Shikako. He tossed over his shoulder. Yoshino, Shikako's mother, peered around the door and waved goodbye with a pleasant smile. She looked like he imagined Shikako would when older, with a round face and long hair bound in a low ponytail. The only difference was their hair color. He'd never express it out loud, but looking at Yoshino, he was certain Shikako would grow into an equally beautiful woman. Have a good evening, Naruto, and visit more often. You really get my lazy daughter more motivated, she replied. Within the house, he heard Shikako say something that sounded suspiciously like, nagging hag. Yoshino's head snapped towards her, slamming the door shut as she shouted, What was that, you lazy-ass brat? Naruto chuckled as he walked down the dirt road. The Nara clan's head family lived on the outskirts of the village, partially in the lush forests that grew within the Leaf's walls. Though many other Nara lived near here, it was unorganized, unlike the Uchiha compound. He'd been there a couple times to use the training grounds with Sasuke. The streets weren't neat or paved, and none of the houses looked the same. It wasn't so much a compound as a loose collection of properties. As he walked down the street, the sun hanging low in the sky, he saw Zabuza leaning against a tree along the road. He stopped short, looking at the Jonin in surprise. There you are, Senju. I heard from the Hokage I'd find you around here. The large swordsman grunted, shoving off of the tree and approaching Naruto. He rose a blonde eyebrow in surprise. Was the man here to see him and talk about the swords? Gotta admit that I'm kind of surprised to see you. Honestly, I was expecting to have to hunt you down. Zabuza scowled. Haku has been badgering me about talking to you. That brat is annoying when he gets persistent. The words were harsh, but there was no heat behind them, more like a parent talking fondly of a child. Anyways, I have to admit, the opportunity to meet someone descended from Genryusai Amakuni was very intriguing. That's the second time hearing that name. Who is it? Naruto asked. All their attempts to learn who Genryusai was had failed. Not even records kept by Lady Mito had succeeded. The Miss Jonin rose a non-existent eyebrow. Guess I'll have to explain. Got anywhere we won't be overheard? He asked. Naruto nodded. He had just the place in mind. Plus, he'd get to show the visitor one of the best features in the village. Just try and keep up, Naruto told Zabuza cheekily, before using a teleportation to zoom through the village. Damn brats! He heard Zabuza curse as he followed. Naruto led him through the village, past forests and apartment buildings, over roofs and under sky bridges, before finally ascending the long, winding steps up to the top of the Hokage monument. Eventually, he came to a stop atop the plateau, looking out over the village as the village bathed in the golden evening light. He turned and leaned against the rail, not surprised at all that Zabuza was already standing there and not breaking a sweat. Just solid rock and air around here. Now, I want to know about this Genryusai and what he has to do with the Seven Swords of the Mist. It's been driving me crazy. The Jonin nodded slowly. So, I suppose you've had a chance to figure out certain swords among the seven don't affect you? Naruto gave a nod of affirmation. The reason is pretty simple. Their creator made it so any chakra-based ability among them can't harm anyone of his blood. Obviously, anything physical can't be stopped, but anything using chakra like the Kiba's lightning, Hiramakariai's shape-shifting, or Samahata's chakra-stealing won't work. Creator as in just one? Naruto exclaimed in disbelief. Yeah, one man made all seven. Genryusai Amakuni, the most skilled user of Tamashi, no ken of his time. That's impossible. The shapes are so different, Naruto protested, eyeing the large knife-like sword on Zabuza's back. He recognized it from his recent studies, Kubikurabocho, the Sever Sword. Rumor had it the blade couldn't be broken no matter what. Not to mention none of them have the same ability. Zabuza let out a belly laugh. Geez, kid, you really don't have any clue just what that bloodline can do, do you? What do you mean by that? Itojiro said something similar. The Miss Jonin sighed, stabbing Kubikirabocho into the ground and leaning on it. The ins and outs are impossible to explain. I've got no idea how it's done. But when mastered, you can form any object you want with that bloodline. And a true master can intentionally change the abilities the sword has. Whatever skill you get now, that's just your base skill. From what I understand, it's a rather long process to produce a single blade with a different ability. When it's finished, a particular set of seal arrays help make the blades nearly indestructible. Head spinning with confusing thoughts, Naruto had to grip the railing to remain standing. That's why the script is the same. Genryusai made all of them. He realized in shock. Could he do the same? The prospect was equal parts exciting and daunting. He had a hard enough time making his sword different sizes. The idea of changing shape and what it took was scary. And changing the ability? Unthinkable. Well, my job's done. I'm going to return to the hotel and rest. Been a long day, Zabuza said, placing his sword back on its strap and turning to leave. He gave one last wave. See ya around, kid. Naruto nodded distractedly, not really noting Zabuza leaving. His mind was still reeling from the revelations. Hours later, Naruto lay in bed, unable to sleep. It wasn't due to the lingering heat of the day, but rather, those same distracted thoughts. Amidst them, one stood out above the others. I need to experiment with Tamashii no Ken. Kakashi's order to rest was furthest from his mind. There were 2 days left before the exams. He wouldn't waste them.
Hey, if you are here and want more fanfics like that in the channel, don't forget to give your comment, like and subscribe for more. So, bye bye.